Hey everyone. Our story begins with Corin awakens in the furnished starting bedroom. Long dark low ponytail, white shirt, and brown harness are visible. Corin Loquake waking up in a furnished room. Corin looks over the medieval fantasy city from the window. The game is called Heroic Legends of Arhan, illustrated fantasy combat and threat imagery from the game world presentation. The game is called Heroic Legends of Arhan. Corin reacts within the game world montage while the main player distinction is introduced. Corin Loke appears as a level 1 non-player character. Corin runs through the fantasy town toward the introductory quest route. Corin Loke appears as a level 1 non-player character. Corin looks through the town as he searches for the main player. Siho complains about his specs. The short-haired Siho variant appears in the town, distinct from Corin's ponytail and harness. Siho complains about his specs. Corin and Siho clasp hands at their shared Earth recognition. Siho has one advantage Corin does not. Siho fights a monster with his staff in the game world action sequence. Siho has one advantage, Corin does not. Corin gives a confident, knowing reaction while describing route and build knowledge. Siho has one advantage Corin does not. Corin and Siho travel through the game world route together. Together, the two men make the arrangement work. Corin and Siho fight together inside a bright magic ring against monsters. Together, the two men make the arrangement work. The pair sits on defeated monsters at sunset after working as a team. The game is supposed to include romance routes. The male heavy party appears in the travel aftermath montage. The game is supposed to include romance routes. Unnamed party members are visible around the potion party sequence. Looking back, Corin realizes the warning signs were already everywhere. Red, dark, retrospective portraits and disappearance imagery. Looking back, Corin realizes the warning signs were already everywhere. Siho's smiling face appears in the retrospective sequence. Looking back, Corin realizes the warning signs were already everywhere. Siho's red-lit grin with the potion becomes a visual warning. Beneath the town is an underground stone vault. Corin enters the underground stone vault gallery. Beneath the town is an underground stone vault. The hidden inventory-like gallery displays collected character-linked items. Beneath the town is an underground stone vault. Corin approaches the red-lit chamber and sees the suspended figure ahead. Beneath the town is an underground stone vault. Corin stands before the suspended woman in the red-lit chamber. When he recognizes her as Marie Dunareff, Siho confronts Corin in the red-lit lab beside the suspended Marie. When he recognizes her as Marie Dunareff, the machine and red fluid in the chamber accompany Siho's explanation of the blood resource. Corin points out the hypocrisy immediately. Corin confronts Siho in the underground lab. Corin points out the hypocrisy immediately. Siho remains calm while defending his efficiency logic. Corin points out the hypocrisy immediately. Siho faces Corin with the vault behind him as the argument turns threatening. Only 3 more kills will bring him to 100,000. Siho checks the kill count with a detached expression. Only 3 more kills will bring him to 100,000. Siho's illustrated face and the explicit 3 more to 100,000 reveal share the critical panel. Corin calls him a monster. Corin and Siho face off in the underground chamber as the argument becomes physical. Corin calls him a monster. Siho stands beside the chained Marie while defending the resource use logic. Purple chains lock Corin in place. Purple restraints hold Corin inside the constructed final stage space. Purple chains lock Corin in place. Siho stands over chain-bound Corin during the possessive declaration. The interface announces, player has died. Challenge failed. The final stage battlefield transition begins around Corin and the game-created space. The interface announces, player has died. Challenge failed. The illustrated failure frame carries the explicit player has died. Challenge failed interface. Corin has returned to the past. Corin wakes again in the starting bedroom after the failure. Corin has returned to the past. Corin arms himself and resolves to act differently. Corin has returned to the past. Corin's final objective names Siho Park as the main player to be killed. The Luthien River disaster floods the village. River disaster leaves the village flooded. Siho reacts with delighted amusement during the disaster recap. The near 100,000 kill count now appears as Corin resolves to act. Corin's resolve and the kill count are illustrated together. The entrance ceremony is 5 days away. Corin moves through the early reset route toward Merkava while the academy timing is established. The entrance ceremony is 5 days away. Topanic mushrooms are shown in the forest as Corin prepares the indirect countermeasure. The entrance ceremony is 5 days away. Corin continues through the forest with focused urgency. The route Corin is waiting for appears as a tutorial quest. The carriage and quest participants occupy the forest road after repairs. The route Corin is waiting for appears as a tutorial quest. The carriage group prepares to depart through the monster-filled forest. The route Corin is waiting for appears as a tutorial quest. The large Beowulf attacks the carriage route. A short-haired young man in a white and gray hooded jacket cuts into the fight. The carriage group reacts as the battle becomes urgent. Early reset Siho, in the white-gray hooded jacket, enters the Beowulf fight with a sword. This is Siho, the reset-era version. Siho stands in the early design while engaging the large beast. This is Siho, the reset-era version. Siho and the Beowulf share a readable combat composition. A lavender-haired swordswoman steps into the rout. Orisha's brown high ponytail, blue eyes and combat outfit are clear as she enters the fight. A lavender-haired swordswoman steps into the rout. Orisha faces the Beowulf with the Demon Slayer blade. Siho deliberately interrupts it. Siho moves into Orisha's attack path during the forest battle. Siho deliberately interrupts it. Siho's poison attack calculation is shown beside the injured Orisha. Orisha steadies herself and prepares her ace skill. Orisha gathers herself in the quick draw position. Orisha steadies herself and prepares her ace skill. The Beowulf battle continues around Orisha and Siho. Siho smiles as he takes the Demon Slayer sword. Siho stands over the aftermath of the Orisha attack. Siho smiles as he takes the Demon Slayer sword. Orisha remains physically present, injured and distressed after Siho's strike. Siho smiles as he takes the Demon Slayer sword. Siho celebrates, obtaining the Demon Slayer sword. A burst coats Siho in topanic mushroom powder. The powder burst explosion interrupts Siho after the blade acquisition. A burst coats Siho in topanic mushroom powder. Topanic-coated Siho reacts as horned forest beasts swarm him. A burst coats Siho in topanic mushroom powder. Korin remains near the injured Orisha and confirms she is still alive. The two men meet face to face. Siho stands above Korin in the moonlit forest face-off. The two men meet face to face. Korin stands guarded in the forest as Siho studies him. The two men meet face to face. Siho recognizes and names Korin Loke. The opening in Siho's defense, early to reset Siho, close up with sword and shocked reaction. The opening in Siho's defense, Korin's risky tactical response as he contests Siho's superior physical stats. The opening in Siho's defense, close-range sword exchange and evasive movement. The opening in Siho's defense, the attack reaches its decisive opening with Korin committed to the strike. A result Korin does not celebrate, post-fight forest image with the caption confirming Korin finally killed the monster. The system makes a strange succession, named Korin Loke card marked LV1 and non-player character. The system makes a strange succession, Korin's physical reaction after the succession transition. Orisha is still alive. Korin holds injured Orisha and asks if she is okay. Orisha is still alive, frog poison explanation and lethal risk treatment context. Orisha is still alive, close treatment action around the embedded fang and bleeding. Orisha is still alive. Korin continues the urgent rescue procedure while Orisha remains conscious enough to respond. Orisha is still alive, full Orisha rescue image after the immediate treatment sequence. The reason for the reset stays private. Korin at the forest campfire preparing the antidote. The reason for the reset stays private. Orisha wakes enough to respond while Korin continues guarding the treatment. The reason for the reset stays private. Korin keeps the plan private as the antidote preparation continues. Inheriting the role without the advantages. Korin begins the conceptual analysis of the game world. Inheriting the role without the advantages. Hero root imagery used while Korin frames the academy incidents and final boss structure. Every familiar window is locked. System, stat, inventory, and combination access denied sequence. Every familiar window is locked. Korin turns from inaccessible player functions toward rune work. Every familiar window is locked. Rune lore card defining ancient letters containing magical power. Duty turns a promise into power. Korin begins engraving selecting the first rune in the rune visualization. Duty turns a promise into power. Duty promise is visualized as a binding commitment to good people. Duty turns a promise into power. Duty rule card states quest-based stat growth and the 10-point failure penalty. Duty turns a promise into power. Duty is established on Korin as the first active constraint. Restraint makes a weakness useful. Spiritual beings in the perception condition are illustrated. Restraint makes a weakness useful. Restraint established with 0 spiritual accuracy and plus 50% physical accuracy. Restraint makes a weakness useful. Korin remains protected while the spiritual rule sequence closes. The oath with a lethal condition. Korin reaches the high-risk oath engraving sequence. The oath with a lethal condition. Korin's exact oath. I will save the world. The oath with a lethal condition. Red failure warning states that failing the oath will result in the sub-player's death. 4 days after the tutorial disaster, the survivor wakes in the emergency hospital. 4 days after the tutorial disaster, the hospital shows her ordinary recovery beginning. The blood-marked bag shows what happened to the recovering survivor's things afterward. The survivor asks for honeycomb candies while the nurse restricts her diet. Korin reaches Merkava Academy. Korin discovers the letter while checking his wallet and student materials. Korin reaches Merkava Academy. Korin absorbs the father's pride and protector aspiration. Why this world matters to Korin. Family memory image supporting the ordinary Korin and loving household narration. Why this world matters to Korin. Family members accepting the outsider in Korin's inherited body. Why this world matters to Korin. Korin's subdued resolve as he contrasts himself with Sihu. A friendly introduction with a dark future. Korin meets Marie Dunaref on the academy approach. A friendly introduction with a dark future. Marie offers Korin a potato while speaking casually. A friendly introduction with a dark future. Marie points out the creation building and training room. A friendly introduction with a dark future. Narrative turn into Marie's abyss of despair, future tragedy. A friendly introduction with a dark future. Marie leaves with a cheerful goodbye and continued sweet potato offer. The ceremony begins with a spell Korin cannot see. Students react as the space expansion spell begins in the common building. The ceremony begins with a spell Korin cannot see. The older authority figure scolds the alarmed rookies. What Merkava trains, ceremony imagery accompanying the history of humans fighting demons and using Orisa magic. What Merkava trains, Professor Fermac Damon carded as professor of the night department and in charge of the entrance ceremony. What Merkava trains, assessment officials and students positioned for the tier evaluation. The bottom 1%, Korin's low very low evaluation result and total 6th tier very low. The bottom 1%, Korin's subdued reaction to the result. The bottom 1%, rank signboard assessment context as Korin calculates the bottom 1%. The soaring fiend is not named, dark-haired, red-eyed, hooded freshman associated with the epithet the soaring fiend. The soaring fiend is not named. Officials question the director's acceptance of the freshman and the value of lower tiers. The soaring fiend is not named. Equal educational opportunity is invoked and the assessment proceeds. 30 seconds against shorthounds. Korin approaches the academy weapons case as the practical assessment begins. 30 seconds against shorthounds. Weapon choice under the 30-second countdown. 30 seconds against shorthounds. Shorthound card, identifying a 5th-tier demonic beast. 30 seconds against shorthounds. Korin striking and evading the shorthounds with practiced movement. 30 seconds against shorthounds, closing action frame after Korin's shorthound defeat sequence. Korin waits for the next wave. Korin stands over the shorthound aftermath and checks the elapsed time. Korin waits for the next wave. Korin waits in the empty space arena as the expected next wave fails to appear. The Academy blames the summoning system. Officials expose the summoning anomaly and invoke Lady Josephine's 20-year perfect spell record. The Academy blames the summoning system. Officials debate whether the device is broken while Korin remains idle. The Academy blames the summoning system. 3 purple hound-like beasts finally appear in front of Korin. 7.3 seconds, continuous full hate action panel of Korin stabbing through the repeated hounds. 7.3 seconds, officials react to the 7.3 second result and call for Professor Fermac. Higher tiers and the Kenaz rune. Fermac asks for the fastest 3rd-4th tier student and Jaeger's roughly 3-minute 30 result is mentioned. Higher tiers and the Kenaz rune. Corrine engages the 4th tier Mad Boar in the assessment space. Higher tiers and the Kenaz rune. Kenaz flame-like rune technique blinds or obscures the owlbear before the finishing strike. Higher tiers and the Kenaz rune. Korin completes the owlbear exchange while officials recognize rune magic. Higher tiers and the Kenaz rune. Officials anticipate Korin's demonic spirit assessment. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. The 5th tier demonic spirit assessment begins around Korin in the empty space room. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Korin reacts to something summoned that he cannot hear or see. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Restraint card states that Korin does not perceive spirits. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Korin counts while testing whether the unseen spirit can affect him. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Demonic beast result card lists 7.3, 3.7, and 11.0 second results as new records. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Spirit result card, Ghost forfeit, Hexwraith disqualified, Banshee disqualified. Restraint makes the spirit test invisible. Formal total card reads Korin Loke, 5th tier knight. 2 students Korin remembers losing. Students compare their new tiers in the academy corridor. 2 students Korin remembers losing. Jaeger Hinspeter full body identity card as a 3rd tier knight. 2 students Korin remembers losing. Korin's prior life memory that Sihu killed Jaeger and Lark suffered the same fate after rumors. 2 students Korin remembers losing. Lark is present among the newly introduced students. Ariu Kassar's equal opportunity speech. Ariu Kassar identified as the Academy's board director. Ariu Kassar's equal opportunity speech. Ariu addresses students with the long journey and unique path message. Ariu Kassar's equal opportunity speech. Academy tier signs and student groups after the director's address. Korin changes the first impression. Jaeger celebrates his 3rd tier result and mocks Lark's ghost loss. Corin changes the first impression. Corin points out the tattoo on the back of Jaeger's neck and begins the informed compliment. Corin changes the first impression. Jaeger explains that his mother made the old-school tattoo line work. Corin changes the first impression. Corin recalls Jaeger's mother coming to the academy after Jaeger went missing in the previous life. Corin changes the first impression. Corin introduces himself to Jaeger, and Lark, as an unnamed student, notices the smooth save. Memorize in the free skill book plan. Lark's special trait is identified as Memorize. Memorize in the free skill book plan. Corin's red-tinted grin reveals the free skill book motive. Memorize and the free skill book plan. Unnamed brown-haired student reacts to Corin's laugh and wonders what he is like. The academy's best free facility, training room access, is shown. Corin visibly fights a blue-green spiritual opponent with his spear. The spear fight shows Corin's unusual academy training exercise continuing. A first-year fighting spirits, Corin takes a hit during the spirit exercise. Nearby students react while a first-year fights spirits in the training room. White-haired instructor gives Corin 10 meal tickets and asks him to report. Corin continues after being struck in the spirit exercise and keeps fighting. There is no next time. Corin is exhausted as Marie approaches with a drink and supportive words. There is no next time. Corin rejects the idea of next time while recalling the missing system resources. There is no next time. Corin explicitly says he killed Sihu Park. There's no next time. Marie remains determined to try her best, while Corin says he desperately needs to get stronger. Finding the limits of 3 years of training. Long continuous technique sequence of Corin cycling through named spear forms. Finding the limits of 3 years of training, Corin recalls his weak body, mana, and aura while continuing the technique test. Finding the limits of 3 years of training, Snake's deceit throw and catch maneuver produces the major training impact. The body cannot keep up yet. Marie reacts with amazed admiration after the technique impact. The body cannot keep up yet. Corin down, exhausted, as he states the maneuver was too much for his current body. A stronger body through the runes of Troth. Next day academy orientation and student area transition. A stronger body through the runes of Troth. Corin identifies a stronger body as the next combat improvement target. A stronger body through the runes of Troth. Duty rune text recurs over Lark in the library sequence. Corin asks Lark about the grimoire. Corin greets Lark as a buddy and asks him to have lunch. Corin asks Lark about the grimoire. Grimoire definition: rare skill book that teaches spells or special traits by reading. Corin asks Lark about the grimoire. Lark reacts as Corin names the grimoire as the subject of their discussion. The library hides more than knowledge. The enormous academy library is framed as the hiding place for the grimoire. The library hides more than knowledge. Lark searches the shelves while Corin explains his memorize-based usefulness and low ability limitation. The library hides more than knowledge. The book titled Sack of All Trades is handled during the search. The library hides more than knowledge. Lark reveals the hidden door behind the library shelves. The promise is interrupted. Lark walks through the narrow stone corridor behind the library and calls it creepy. The promise is interrupted. Corin confirms the bargain to help Lark get rid of an evil spirit. The promise is interrupted. A sudden attack interrupts Corin before he can explain the plan. The promise is interrupted. Dark red-lit, red-eyed smiling figure says they can finally get started. The hidden quest continues. Corin leads Lark through the hidden stone corridor toward the concealed quest area. The hidden quest continues. Corin keeps the special quest objective in mind while advancing through the corridor. Sabancia Duke needs a body. Sabancia Duke named as a special tier demonic spirit. Sabancia Duke needs a body. Duke attacks through the red-lit corridor in a tall continuous action composition. Sabancia Duke needs a body. Restraint card repeats that Corin does not perceive spirits. Sabancia Duke needs a body. Corin names Sabancia Duke and acknowledges the inability to perceive spiritual beings. Sabancia Duke needs a body. Duke proposes going inside Lark's body instead. The vampire who sealed himself in a book. Marks are introduced as inborn traits that can transform people into vampires or werewolves. The vampire who sealed himself in a book, Commander Sabancia Duke, transforms into a vampire and attacks his servant. The vampire who sealed himself in a book, Duke seals himself inside the grimoire, stored in the academy library. The vampire who sealed himself in a book, the self-imprisoned Duke, is framed as a family-centered tragic threat. Lark is the host Corin can exploit. Duke attacks through the corridor after the possession transition. Lark is the host Corin can exploit. Corin admits guilt toward Lark while explaining why Lark's low physical stats make him the chosen host. Lark is the host Corin can exploit. Corin fights the possessed body in a dense corridor action composition. Lark is the host Corin can exploit. Corin weighs Duke's cape top rank item plan against the difference between himself and Sihu. Giving Duke a proper ending, Corin tells Duke what happened to Luina and Cecilia after the sealing. Giving Duke a proper ending, Duke reacts to the family account while Corin keeps the conversation going. Giving Duke a proper ending, Duke thanks Corin and apologizes. The host remains alive after the confrontation. Soul Dust, the Grimoire, and Lark alive. Epic Soul Dust reward card appears after Sabancia Duke's resolution. Soul Dust, the Grimoire, and Lark alive. Grimoire card defines the soul container and trait spell learning split. Soul Dust, the Grimoire, and Lark alive. Regeneration trait card with the displayed wording variant and healing description. Soul Dust, the Grimoire, and Lark alive. Lark is shown alive after the possession confrontation. Soul Dust, the Grimoire, and Lark alive. Lark receives and begins reading the Grimoire. Duty rewards both sides of the quest. Duty reward sequence begins with separate point bonuses. Duty rewards both sides of the quest. Lark Bergman's surname appears in the Rune of Duty result. Duty rewards both sides of the quest. Corin reacts to the sized or source of the duty reward without a level up notification. A public test after Duke's reward. Marie encourages Corin as the training room test is arranged. A public test after Duke's reward. Students place bets against Corin while he accepts the controlled trial. A public test after Duke's reward. Corin prepares for the 5th tier spirit test with the basic spear technique. One basic thrust destroys a 5th tier spirit. Corin uses basic thrust, Poisonous Snake, against the 5th tier spirit. One basic thrust destroys a 5th tier spirit. The spirit is destroyed in the attack's immediate impact sequence. One basic thrust destroys a 5th tier spirit. Observers state that Corin destroyed the 5th tier spirit in one go. Marie can follow the technique. Corin questions how Marie can track the ultimate Poisonous Snake technique. Marie can follow the technique. Marie gives Corin his share of the betting winnings. Marie can follow the technique. Corin and Marie laugh and look forward to more dealings. 5 of 6 spear techniques but not enough mana. Moonlit Corin reflects on martial arts progress and 5 of 6 ultimate spear techniques. 5 of 6 spear techniques but not enough mana. Hagla's card reads not enough mana. 5 of 6 spear techniques but not enough mana. Corin concludes that solving rune magic's mana cost would make him stronger than before. Corin recognizes a voice in the nighttime academy corridor and thinks of the one female character Siho could not kill. Huaron knows the body is wrong. Identity card explicitly reads the soaring fiend Huaron and shows the red-eyed, dark violet-haired woman. Huaron knows the body is wrong. Huaron approaches Corin through the academy grounds after he tries to ignore her. Huaron knows the body is wrong. Huaron asks whether Corin's body belongs to him. Huaron knows the body is wrong. Corin wonders whether Huaron knows he is not from this world. Huaron calls Corin a thief. Huaron's paradoxical living corpse description and soul color premise. Huaron calls Corin a thief. Corin reflects on whether Corin Loke and his former Earth self are different people. Huaron calls Corin a thief. Huaron calls Corin a thief and denies his right to the body he inhabits. Huaron calls Corin a thief. Corin argues that original and newly formed souls can coexist through a two-personality analogy. Huaron calls Corin a thief. The exchange closes with Corin's departure line after Huaron's crime warning. The mission board is a test, not a level grind. Mission board where players accept missions before the next main quest. Corin states that leveling is not his primary goal and that he came to test something. The mission board is a test, not a level grind. Unnamed brown-haired student or woman stares at the mission notices. Arisha is alive in this route. Arisha Aiden is named and visually anchored at the mission board. Arisha is alive in this route. Arisha explains that wealthy parents provide no student aid, and she must earn money independently. Arisha is alive in this route. Arisha offers a patrol mission while Corin declines to complete his own mission sequence. A cat mission activates duty. Corin accepts and carries out the small cat rescue mission against a water demon. A cat mission activates duty. Duty completed names Anna McMillan as the person whose misfortune Corin did not ignore. A cat mission activates duty, difficulty E-card, and 5 points equally distributed across all stats. A cat mission activates duty. Corin confirms the mission activated the runes and that trivial jobs can boost abilities. Corn syrup and a second duty completion. Separate long-haired, red-eyed, sharp-toothed figure associated with the corn syrup clue. Corn syrup and a second duty completion. White-haired chef receives the corn syrup ingredient clue for the cold chicken sauce. Corn syrup and a second duty completion. Duty completed card names, Delichester Chickenson, and gives a second difficulty E reward. Corn syrup and a second duty completion. Corin reacts that the rune activated despite his self-interest and jokes about seasoned chicken. Purple teleport effect introduces the blonde, bespectacled, red-hatted witch, visually consistent with the later Miss Josephine Great Archwitch sequence. Huaran the witch and a separate voice. The witch reacts silently as Huaran turns toward her. Huaran, the witch, and a separate voice. Separate short-haired, brown-haired figure or voice associated with the birth-related lines. Huaren, the witch, and a separate voice. Huaren returns in the Sunset City view after the separate voice cutaway. The Hunting Grounds rules. The Hunting Grounds title and survival evaluation briefing. The Hunting Grounds rules. Students are told to reach the northern cabin and fasten rank corresponding armbands. The Hunting Grounds rules. Time plus amount quality of armbands determines score exchangeable for items. Honey Bomb Candy from Arisha. Corin notes Huaron's absence and assumes she is too overpowered for practical assignments. Honey Bomb Candy from Arisha. Arisha says Corin's advice helped cover her living expenses and offers candy intended for her sister. Honey Bomb Candy from Arisha. Honey Bomb Candy is identified, and Arisha reacts to receiving it. The Great Archwitch teleports the students. Miss Josephine is named as the Great Archwitch who can teleport so many students. The Great Archwitch teleports the students. Purple magic transports the students to the hunting grounds. The Great Archwitch teleports the students. Corin arrives with his spear as students begin fighting immediately. The Great Archwitch teleports the students. Battle Royale rules are framed as students starting randomly and stealing armbands for points. Arisha's blue armband and the hidden rune. Corin identifies the second-tier armband as the most important item in the Battle Royale. Arisha's blue armband and the hidden rune. Arisha's blue second-tier armband is identified as Corin's priority target. Arisha's blue armband and the hidden rune. Corin explains that Honey Bomb Candy was engraved with a tracking rune that will help them reunite. Arisha's blue armband and the hidden rune. Corin charges through the woods calling Arisha's name with a red-eyed, predatory expression. Warren enters voluntarily. The blonde, red-hatted witch addresses the silver-haired man as director and says she will enter the woods. Warren enters voluntarily. The director says the girl requested participation rather than being sent by him. Warren enters voluntarily. Corin moves ahead through the hunting grounds toward the unresolved encounter. Warren enters voluntarily. Warren is shown in the woods with the line that someone must have changed her mind. The practical begins with Arisha already in control. Arisha confronts the surrounding students after dominating the group fight. The practical begins with Arisha already in control. Corin appears with spear and red-orange intensity while a nearby student recognizes him. The practical begins with Arisha already in control. Corin smiles while demanding Arisha's blue armband. Why Arisha expects to win. The 30 seconds earlier duel resumes with Corin and Arisha engaged in close combat. Why Arisha expects to win. Corin and Arisha collide in a bright spear and sword exchange. Why Arisha expects to win. Arisha is driven down as Corin's spear line breaks her rhythm. Revolving Yank Plunge. Corin's spear redirects Arisha's attack in the first motion of the counter. Revolving Yank Plunge. Corin presses Arisha's weapon line down while she is caught in the counter. Revolving Yank Plunge. Corin drives the spear in a straight finishing line as Arisha is knocked back. Revolving Yank Plunge. Arisha lies below the exchange, visibly stunned by the skill gap. Doron Warski changes the calculation. Corin takes Arisha's blue armband after the duel. Doron Warski changes the calculation. Doron stands with the layered steel sword and multiple floating blades in a long illustrated strip. Doron Warski changes the calculation. Corin breaks into a run through the forest while Doron remains the pursuing threat. Doron Warski changes the calculation. Doron advances with several floating swords as the forest chase closes in. The cabin is another opponent. Cranel and the golem stand at the cabin exit, while Corin and Arisha arrive. The cabin is another opponent. The three-way arrangement becomes visible. Cranel's golem in front, Corin in the middle, and Doron closing from behind. The cabin is another opponent. Corin faces the golem and the pursuing fighters at the closed route. Corin turns the three-way fight into a rout. A heavy impact lands in the crowded three-way fight near the cabin. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. The cabin administrator reacts as Corin presents 3 blue armbands. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Overhead aftermath shows the opponents down around the damaged golem while Corin remains standing. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Arisha watches the aftermath and processes how Corin won. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Corin stands with red-orange aura, spear, and collected armband after the fight. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Doron sits among the aftermath, questioning how Corin knew his weapons and special traits. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Corin gives blunt golem advice while standing near the defeated Cranel. 3 armbands and 3 different impressions. Cranel reacts angrily after Corin says he has no friends. The reward that opens the next route. Corin leaves the practical area while the narration turns toward the strongest remaining first year. Yule meets the strongest person on the grounds. Yule's forest-associated monster effects fill the encounter area. Yule meets the strongest person on the grounds. Marie's blue water magic overwhelms the forest encounter, revealing the power gap. Yule meets the strongest person on the grounds. Marie appears in a full blue magic character reveal. Yule meets the strongest person on the grounds. Yule is left wet and defeated beneath the forest effects. Yule meets the strongest person on the grounds. Marie and Yule meet in the forest after the attack. A new red-eyed question. Marie's eye fills the transition into the unexpected final encounter. A new red-eyed question. Marie faces a dark-haired woman in a black cross-motif outfit at the forest edge. The red-eyed woman is named Hworan. The dark-clad red-eyed figure moves through the forest confrontation with Marie. The red-eyed woman is named Hworan. Marie answers with bright ice crystal magic in the Monster Roll forest scene. The red-eyed woman is named Hworan. The red-eyed figure accepts the escalation, while Marie remains in the icy forest setting. Corin turns 117 points into a shopping spree. Corin considers the reward result with a focused, satisfied expression. Corin stands with the reward choices and selects the mandrake seed while the remaining points purchase is introduced. Crenelle accepts help without asking for it. Crenelle holds and examines a golem core after the practical. Crenelle accepts help without asking for it. Corin and Crenelle speak beside the damaged golem area while students recover. Crenelle accepts help without asking for it. Corin smiles knowingly as his previous life memory of Crenelle and large battle golems takes over. The results are good, but the injuries are real. Crenelle repairs the golem core among the post-exam results. The results are good, but the injuries are real. Corin reacts to the injured forest-associated Yule after the practical. The results are good, but the injuries are real. Corin looks over the forest aftermath and questions what happened to Marie. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Marie stands in blue magic as the Academy's prodigy and potential successor are described. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Marie is visibly exhausted after the exercise and pauses to recover. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Blue magic collides with the red-black threat through the forest ice. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Hworan drives through the ice toward Marie in a red-black and blue collision. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Marie raises a stronger ice spell after basic magic fails. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Marie's face shows strain, sweat, and the cost of using stronger spells. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. A large ice and impact burst fills the forest as Marie's advanced spell meets Hworan's pressure. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Hworan appears as a high-contrast red-eyed threat in the forest. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Hworan's red-black attack continues through the shattered forest ice. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. The intervention separates Marie from the continuing attack. Marie uses everything she has against Hworan. Marie lies exhausted on the ground after Hworan is stopped. 3 weeks until Marie's transformation. The hunting grounds forest stands quiet after the practical's surprising results. 3 weeks until Marie's transformation. Marie rests in a recovery bed after the confrontation. 3 weeks until Marie's transformation. Corin appears in the recovery area transition while reasoning about the unchanged storyline and preparation deadline. The mandrake seed disappears into the lake. Corin enters the forest outskirts and turns toward the lake path. The mandrake seed disappears into the lake. Corin applies eye drops before attempting the lake event. The mandrake seed disappears into the lake. Corin loses his balance as the valuable mandrake seed slips toward the lake. The mandrake seed disappears into the lake. The seed splashes into the lake while Corin reacts as though it is gone forever. The god of the forest rewards honesty. The white-haired god of the forest towers above Corin at the lake. The god of the forest rewards honesty. The lake event presents the god in the item testing encounter above the water. The god of the forest rewards honesty. The god of the forest questions Corin about the seed while holding the lake event's authority. 3 seeds change the preparation route. Corin confirms that the regular seed is his after refusing the gold and silver claims. 3 seeds change the preparation route. Corin celebrates while the gold, silver, and regular seed resources are shown together in the composition. Corin's party plan. Corin appears in blue light as he decides to form a party capable of facing the future boss. Corin's party plan. Marie sits in the dark recovery room after the Hworan confrontation. Corin's party plan. Marie remains asleep or recovering beneath the blue light while Corin's plan continues over the image. Corin's party plan. Doran is shown in combat art as the planned mercenary recruit. Corin's party plan. The forest-associated druid recruit is shown in green-blue action art. Corin's party plan. Crenelle appears with golem equipment as Corin's planned friend and tank specialist. The unexpected development arrives early. Marie's eye glows red in the recovery room darkness. The unexpected development arrives early. The glasses-wearing adult reacts under red lighting to Marie's change. The unexpected development arrives early. Marie's red eyes, open mouth, fangs, and clawed hand appear in the final vampire state image. Hworan remains confined under the Academy's supervision. Corin Loke visits Hworan with food in her room. Hworan remains herself while confined in the room. Waran looks toward Korin Loke as the irregular confinement continues. Mr. Crone guards the infirmary while the academy searches. Korin Loke arrives with some food for Krone. Korin uses a delivery excuse near the restricted infirmary. The guard denies infirmary access as Korin leaves. Korin reaches the infirmary scene and looks toward Marie's hidden condition. The bite marks confirm Korin's worst. A partially seen infirmary figure is visible near Marie, without a clean Isabel identity lock. The bite. Close artwork shows the bite marks at Marie's neck and the transformed state evidence. The bite marks confirm. Korin reacts with visible strain as the planned rescue roster collapses. The rescue requires 4 phases. Arisha is shown in the aftermath of Korin's earlier attack, with her weapon and body damaged. Huaran. Crenel and Korin stand beside the damaged golem aftermath. Huaran is powerful, but not a safe substitute. Korin presents the pure soul dust collateral to Doran in the training room. Doran joins for soul. Doran accepts the employer's offer, shown in a close silver-haired fighter portrait. Doran joins for soul dust. Korin and Ul meet among the library shelves while the lost glyph bargain is made. Ul trades lost. Ul turns toward Korin in the library, considering what he knows about her people's traditional glyphs. Korin pitches the dangerous, low-pay mission to the 2 cafeteria students. Glory recruits the remaining bodies. Jaeger and the glasses-wearing student accept the glory-driven mission, while Corinne celebrates the recruitment. Glory recruits the green nature magic spreads from Ul as the party searches the single academy forest. Ul's nature spirits surge around her and point the party toward the person they seek. Ul's spirits. A demonic beast bursts into the party's path from the forest. The demonic beasts are running from. The unnamed glasses-wearing supporter is struck during the beast attack, while the party tries to hold formation. The glasses-wearing supporter studies the abnormal beasts and helps interpret their behavior. The demonic beasts are running. Marie emerges in a red aura transformed state at the head of the fleeing beast path. Marie is at. Ul and the unnamed glasses-wearing supporter hold the rear support side of the provisional formation. Marie is at. Doran and Jaeger occupy the support frontline side of the group as the party prepares to fight. Marie. Korin looks toward the front line and takes responsibility for the immediate threat. Marie is at the. The assembled party faces the active red-lit threat as the mission objective locks in. The emergency mission. Marie advances through red-black power in her long-haired, red-dressed, transformed vampire state. Marie's glowing eyes and fangs fill the close-up as the transformed attack state takes over. The familiar drops from above toward the party and Marie's red-lit battlefield. Doran plants his layered steel blade against the familiar's red impact while Marie remains behind it. Korin studies the familiar with a controlled, analytical expression. Ul casts green forest magic with her antlered headdress and druid clothing clearly visible. Rapid growth surges through the trees around Korin, Doran, Jaeger, Ul, and the support members. Ul braces behind her green protective effect as the forest defense absorbs the pressure. Marie's red familiar attack cuts through the forest battlefield as the encounter's escalation is explained. Red slashes crack across the battlefield as Korin contrasts the remembered scenario with the changed one. The provisional party spreads through the forest as Korin manages distance and support positions. Red alchemic shards burst across the battlefield as Frostify approaches. Korin's red-lit eye and focused face register the spell timing he remembers. The alchemic impact erupts through the terrain in a red-pink blast. Green glyph energy tears through the forest as Ul's ancient spell sequence activates. The giant Wickerman towers over the small provisional party in the night forest. Korin directs Jaeger toward the surviving owlbear while the fighters turn toward the summon. The live owlbear slams into the Wickerman's burning structure and becomes its sacrifice. The fueled Wickerman rises against the night sky with its flame glowing in the forest. The Wickerman's glowing green core is struck as it attacks the familiar. The Wickerman collides with the familiar while Marie's red aura floods the background. Korin reacts in alarm as the expected elemental advantage collapses. Marie stands in the red special tier power field after the Wickerman plan fails to control the encounter. Ul recoils and begins to withdraw after exhausting the mana needed to maintain the countermeasure. Ul runs back while Jaeger, Doran, and Korin's remaining fighters regroup for the damage opening. Marie's red attack cuts down the lane as Korin, Doran, and Jaeger charge beneath it. Doran is caught in the red-lit frontline exchange as the party presses its opening. Jaeger's repeated swing lands with a bright impact as his strength builds. Jaeger celebrates the apparent opening, still unaware that the next phase is about to activate. Marie's glowing red eye signals the transition into the next boss phase. A red eye-like impact expands through the forest as the sealed domain forms. Weapons lie scattered across the red domain floor, showing the party's broken formation after the transition. The remaining fighters are thrown through the red arena, while Kuren grips his spear and keeps moving. Corin turns in the red arena, visibly separated from the rest of the provisional party. Corin faces the enormous red familiar with transformed Marie hovering above it inside the sealed arena. Corin stands alone with his spear in blue-red light, holding on after the party rule has failed. Marie's red-eyed, bandaged vampire presentation fills the interior frame. Marie's fangs and red eye emerge in the feeding state. Marie bites the person in front of her as the red-lit feeding moment peaks. Marie is visibly distressed and blood-marked after the bite, with the injured friend in the foreground. Marie flees through the red-purple interior action space, carrying the vampire state tension into the forest approach. Marie's isolated red eye holds on the fear and flight after the bite. Corin arrives with his spear at the forest edge, looking toward Marie's route. Corin meets the mass of red hound-like beasts in the ruined forest battlefield. Corin drives the spear through the first exchange as the pack closes around him. Several red beasts rush Corin through impact in red debris. Corin's spear technique breaks through the red pack in a broad impact composition. A red beast flashes through the forest with speed, emphasized by the body angle and red motion field. Corin studies the beast's timing with a focused close-up before committing to the counter. The red impact blooms at the point where Corin's predicted strike meets the beast. Corin's spear remains extended through the red debris after the poisonous snake counter. An injured red beast hangs above the battlefield while Corin remains below it. The injured red beast remains alert and protective despite the damage. Corin stands with his spear after the pack encounter, ready to continue toward Marie. Transformed Marie fills the final phase battlefield in her red aura vampire state. Corin braces in the final phase field, while the encounter's normal party pattern is no longer available. Transformed Marie lunges at Corin across the red-lit final phase space. Corin's eye and face register the pressure of the attack at close range. Marie holds Corin in the red drain attack as his body is pulled into her recovery mechanic. Corin's hand and straining body hold against the drain while he insists he can endure it. Corin's face and neck remain visible in the red-lit drain aftermath. Kind child Marie smiles while holding a potato for the people she met. A hand rests gently on Marie's hair in the memory emotional appeal. Corin holds the transformed Marie close as he asks her to slow down. Marie's transformed profile remains close to Corin while the refusal continues. Sabancia Duke appears in the historical vampire flashback as the cautionary precedent. A red demonic beast group fills the flashback action frame, tying Marie's feeding restraint to beasts rather than people. Corin and Marie remain joined in the red beam confrontation after the historical comparison. Marie's tears remain visible in the transformed state as Corin's argument reaches her. Corin's face holds the apology and refusal to reduce Marie to a game character. The mentor NPC memory places Corin beside the adult who protected and taught him. Corin holds transformed Marie against the red-lit battlefield while choosing to protect her. Corin looks upward in the blue-lit aftermath, carrying the choice into the reward gate boundary. Marie sits inside the enclosure with food while Corin stands nearby and reacts to her rushed eating. Corin faces Marie across the confinement space as she tries to hide her embarrassment. Marie curls inward in fear while Corin listens from the room behind her. Corin rises through a blue training room effect, visualizing the persistence Marie admires. Marie reacts to Corin's happy ending principle with a startled close-up. Marie stands with her basket and raised hand as Corin's reassurance reaches her. Marie blushes in close-up after Corin says he wants her to become happy. Marie turns away in profile, still carrying the weight of whether she deserves happiness. Corin walks through the academy corridor while the institution keeps Marie apart and considers a return. Corin turns toward the tall, white-haired Director Kassar in the academy corridor. Corin flinches in alarm as the meeting appears to become a punishment hearing. Director Kassar smiles calmly as the formal response shifts toward a safety inspection. Corin stands with the academy officials in the corridor as the public version of Marie's incident is planned. Corin's lowered mouth and tense expression show his discomfort with being praised for the adult's failure. Corin smiles tensely while the adult official's thanks and offer of a wish settle over the scene. Marie sits alone on the floor inside the stone room, wrapped in isolation and guilt. Purple confinement, magic coils around Marie and the room like a second cage. The red-black vampire beast image embodies the monster Marie fears she became. Corin's hand rests against Marie as the memory of his sacrifice and kindness reaches through her guilt. Marie walks back through the academy corridor after official isolation ends. Marie turns toward classmates with her golden eyes wide as they greet her as a special tier student. Marie sits alone on the bed beside the blood pack reminder while imagining Isabelle's fear and hatred. Marie turns toward the door after the knock interrupts her plan to leave. Isabelle embraces Marie at the doorway while Marie stares back in shock. Isabelle's smiling, glasses-wearing face remains close to Marie after the reunion. Marie covers her mouth and cries with relief beside Isabel. Isabel reaches around Marie's head in the promise of continued friendship. Isabel steadies Marie face to face as the friendship reconciliation becomes mutual. Isabel smiles through the reunion while explaining that Corin helped her leave the hospital. Corin walks away through the warm academy corridor before Marie can catch him. Marie covers her face in embarrassed relief while Isabel remains beside her. Marie's eye and bandaged face hold on the realization that Corin helped again. An unidentified white-haired man and blonde woman with glasses appear together in the late montage. Corin stands in the sunlit city after the old story has diverged. Corin's face holds the satisfaction of realizing that a new world has truly begun. Corin trains shirtless and bandaged, gripping the weapon through another punishing repetition. Purple energy coils through Corin's weapon as he releases the extreme poisonous snake technique. The table fills with Marie's potato-based meal for the hard-working Corin. Corin's cut finger draws Marie's startled, hungry attention at the meal. A packaged blood bag sits on the table as the safer alternative Marie has been using. Marie blushes and panics at the way the offer to drink Corin's blood sounds. Corin drinks the small vampire blood elixir Marie gives him. Corin stands energized after the elixir takes effect. Corin grins at the new resource pool and the possibility of starting the coming plot on better terms. Arisha walks away from the training route as the chapter shifts to the gifted second-tier knight. Arisha trains with a single sword, making her natural ability unmistakable. Arisha wears a pleased, self-satisfied expression after choosing comfort over practice. Arisha relaxes in her gray hoodie with shopping bags and honey bomb candies. Arisha freezes mid-shopping as Corin appears in the foreground and catches her avoiding practice. Arisha sweats and bristles while Corinne stands with the calm persistence she wants to escape. Corin smiles and offers Arisha a job rather than continuing the basics lecture. Corin presents the gold coin payment while Arisha listens with immediate interest. Arisha agrees as Corin secures the paid short-term mission. The patrol party moves through the city route that should have been a simple paid assignment. Arisha stands among the defeated low-tier beasts after clearing the route. The city guards praise Arisha after her effortless 10-beast and owlbear patrol. Arisha smiles smugly at the praise, enjoying a job that asks for talent but not discipline. The patrol group compares Arisha with the older sister, whose sword talent sets the family benchmark. A green magic flare erupts over the night route and signals that the forward group needs help. Corin's special goggles and Arisha's turn toward the wooded danger make the signal's hidden visibility concrete. The Beowulf leads the wolf pack into the attack as the nest initially looks like a normal beast fight. A crossing sword strike cuts through the Beowulf, establishing Arisha's easy victory over this first threat. Arisha's blue-lit eyes widen when the nest reveals a threat above the patrol's assumed tier. Arisha launches Aiden-style single blade, area slash at the green flame Dullahan. The green flame Dullahan lunges with an unnatural, flexible body that refuses to behave like normal armor. Arisha's panic peaks as she calls Corin for help, while the guards say he is fighting elsewhere. The guards run as Arisha is overwhelmed, confirming that Corin's separate fight leaves no immediate rescue. The Dullahan's skull and armor break apart in a burst of blue-green fragments. Arisha looks back in shock at the sword and the person who interrupted the Dullahan's attack. The long-haired woman stands over Arisha in the snow-lit aftermath of the rescue. Lunia's cold blue-eyed close-up holds on the older sister, who calls Arisha weak, lazy, and conceited. Lunia stands over Arisha in the aftermath, establishing the older sister's commanding presence. Lunia stands with her sword, while Arisha kneels beneath a reprimand. Corin's spear and uneasy reaction mark the fighter who is watching Arisha while appearing to fight for himself. Lunia's hard glare fixes the consequences of Arisha's failure. Lunia faces Corin as the chapter names her sword status and tests his connection to Arisha. Corin bows before Lunia while presenting himself as an external 8-trigram spear disciple and Arisha's friend. An ornate framed illustration shows 2 unnamed spear-associated figures from the martial tradition Lunia references. Lunia leads the Aiden response group away after the immediate demonic beasts are reported eliminated. Aiden students and an instructor occupy the training hall whose history is being explained. Arisha kneels in the training hall while the surrounding students react to her submission to Lunia. Lunia reviews Arisha's mission history and the easy assignments she accepted. Arisha flushes at the admission that she chose the cafe mission for its cute uniform. A masked, dual-tone figure delivers the ominous true nature warning. Arisha slumps after Lunia's judgment. The Aiden group settles around Lunia as she asks about the boy connected to Arisha. Lunia's profile and pipe-like prop hold the room's evaluative pause. Corin stands among beasts while his attention remains visually centered on protection and control. Lunia smiles with measured approval after reading Corin's instinct and experience. The potato pie and fresh lamb fill the table at Marie's feast. Marie and Corin share the meal in a relaxed, food-centered beat. Marie blushes while gripping Corin's hands across the table. Marie recognizes the light-haired glasses girl, Isabel, and moves away from the cafeteria encounter. Yule and Corin study together at a table, recalling Ogum and their classmate connection. Doron and Corin stand over defeated wolves, grounding Corin's memory in paid work, rather than romance. Waran waits in chains with black hair, red eyes, and nun-like dark clothing. The fish shop exterior establishes the ordinary place where Corin brings Waran to eat. Corin presents a bowl of fish to Waran. Waran's red-eyed close-up makes the intensity of her appetite unmistakable. Waran eats forcefully while Corin tries to correct the manners of a demonic beast companion. Jaeger panics when the midterm exam is announced. Corin confidently says that taking the top score will be easy. Students sit for the written test while the proctor starts the examination. Corin holds a completely blank answer sheet after the written test. Jaeger and classmates regroup after the exam while Corin's result becomes the topic. Corin sits in grayscale with the blank sheet, realizing he never learned ordinary school subjects in his previous life. A tear, and Corin's tightened expression, turn the blank result into a personal crisis. Corin clenches his shirt and reframes the failure as a chance to make up the points. Students gather in the festival hall for the practical examination. The students circulate in the hall as the team-based event is organized. An instructor-side view establishes that the night department professors and temporary instructors will grade the teams. Corin grins as he promises to defeat the instructor and earn the extra credit. Corin stands ready with his spear just before the returning instructor is shown. Lunia stands as the sword-bearing practical instructor and directly addresses Corin Loke. Corin's shocked reaction closes on the unexpected meeting. High view of the circular Aiden practical exam arena, stepped spectator seating, and the two groups positioned for the test. The black-clad 5 blades stand together as the elite instructors introduced for the first-year practical exam. The 5 blades combination attack erupts upward in a bright, multi-directional blast. Multiple first-year students are thrown through the dust and debris after the impact. The labeled illusion blade Milia moves through the arena with a blade sweeping past the frame. Swift blade Jenny crosses swords with Arisha at close range after naming herself as Arisha's opponent. Milia is surrounded by 5 colored arcane blades as the elite group attacks from multiple angles. A tight blade impact interrupts the students' attempted resistance in the arena. Jenny presses her blade against Arisha's guard while lecturing the younger student's unstable stance. Arisha is knocked down beneath the practical exam arena as Jenny's critique lands. Lunia is seen from behind in the arena while Team B faces her and the spectators watch the unexpected matchup. Lunia's face and glowing blue-white eye emerge inside the blue domain lighting. A circular impact erupts through the arena as Lunia's opening exchange scatters Team B. Corin gestures toward an exhausted student being brought back while the arena remains dusty behind him. Lunia looks down with a severe, red-eyed close-up as she dismisses the remaining student's ability. Corin kneels with his spear while Lunia stands behind him and calls the pair the only students left. Lunia's blue-eyed face fills the frame as she challenges Corin to fight a truly strong opponent. A previous life combat memory shows Lunia and Corin fighting side by side with blades and spear crossing the frame. Corin kneels with his spear and a determined grin as he commits to surpassing Lunia with his own strength. Corin and Lunia collide inside a tight, high-speed spear and sword exchange. Corin braces beneath Lunia's sweeping strike, making the spectators question how a first-year can remain in the exchange. Corin sweats and looks upward while the crowd identifies him as a first-year 5th-tier knight. Lunia stands calmly across from the bent, breathing hard Corin after another exchange. Lunia adopts the blue-lit sword stance for the most powerful skill of Galand Aiden, facing Corin's spear. Students in the stands panic and look toward the duel as the attack appears too dangerous for an exam. A vertical blue-white slash and Lunia's glowing eye define the Aiden-style single-blade deceptive domain slash. Inside the dark star-like domain, Lunia takes a half step while Corin raises his spear against the frozen world. Lunia's large blade hangs over Corin's spear in the star-filled domain, making the frozen timing problem visible. Corin's face strains inside the blue-black domain as he can perceive the stopped world but cannot move normally. Corin's blue-white spear point rises against Lunia's larger blade in the starry domain. The spear point meets the blade with a red-edged impact inside the frozen space. Lunia's black silhouette and glowing eye stand over the blade as the domain response releases its pressure. Lunia's glowing eye and calm face acknowledge that Corin finally responded to the domain. Lunia walks away with her sword while Corin faces her, after she advises him to use a better spear. Corin gives a confident, sweat-marked grin as he admits that he accomplished what he hoped for. Corin stands over the arena floor with a confident grin while Lunia's departing presence remains in the scene. Corin in the practical exam arena after the confrontation, with the academy setting and spectators establishing the public result. The watching students and officials react to Corin's result and the fact that a 5th-tier student stood inside Lunia's technique. An Academy observer studies Korin's technique and spiritual being training with unusual interest. The forge worker faces Korin while the secret family technique is discussed. Hands and blue-lit weapon material during the forging sequence. Korin bows toward the older silver-haired figure as the completed weapon is presented. Korin holds the finished silver spear in the weapon shop, visibly armed with a tool meant to withstand a domain. A long-haired figure is seen from behind in the red-lit previous life memory. The unnamed injured woman appears in the violent memory, with blood and a weapon close to her. A blood-red eye and diagonal wound detail sharpen the sensory memory of human blood. Orisha's profile as the fifth-tier party composition and her role beside Korin are established. Korin joins Orisha and the other Guardians League members for the field mission. Korin and Orisha travel together in a brief, more relaxed exchange before the ambush. The larger party travels with other Guardians watching Korin and Orisha from the formation. Orisha's close reaction as she answers the question of whether she can abandon the sword. The parties captured Beowulf and the forest-side hall establish the mission's ordinary objective. Demonic spirits strike through the forest as the mission's scale changes from a capture to a battle. The party is forced into close combat with multiple demonic spirits at once. The unnatural spirit shapes crowd the path, supporting Orisha's suspicion that something is directing them. Orisha's eye focuses on the abnormal movement as the mist begins to define the enclosure. A black-red demonic knight rises behind Orisha in the mist. Orisha swings back at the demonic knight with her sword despite the close-range danger. Blood marks Orisha after the attack, turning the supernatural battle into a human injury and sensory trigger. Orisha's horrified face as she asks whether she has killed a person. Korin and Orisha face the black magic corpses in the forest as Korin explains what is moving them. A red-black face-obscured silhouette stands behind the encounter as Korin recognizes the John Doe connection. Korin drives the silver spear through the vertical mountain destroyer strike. The spear impact tears through the visible target in the forest. Korin and Orisha confront the red-black aftermath as the destroyed target is understood to be only one puppet. Korin's red-lit profile as he realizes that John Doe's special trait is concealment and the real body is not in reach. The cursed red mist erupts around the party after the activator mage undead reaches 0 health. Korin's red-lit face holds against the haze as he explains the danger and recalls being trapped before. Red undead forms and pressure fill the mist as the party's route collapses into flight. A bright slash cuts through the red haze while the hidden danger continues to close around the escaping group. The party runs from the red mist while the forest route becomes an emergency escape. The glowing return rune pulls the silver spear through the red mist toward Korin. Korin's hand and the silver spear connect as the weapon finishes returning to him. Charlie in the red robe stumbles in the escape route as Korin reaches the decision to use the robe as cover. Korin grips Charlie and orders him to get up, run out of the forest, and give Korin the robe. Korin, now moving in the red robe, dashes back toward the mist instead of ending his escape. Korin braces inside the red mist, demonstrating that regeneration lets him last longer but does not make the environment safe. Orisha is struck again inside the haze, making her rapid blood loss the immediate rescue clock. Orisha slashes through the red strands of mist, but the barrier remains intact. A long-haired, dark-clothed figure stands over the memory scene as Orisha recalls an unnamed savior. Orisha's remembered figure turns through the red memory as she resolves to save others the way the savior saved her. Orisha's injured face turns as Korin calls her name through the haze. A weapon-bearing silhouette moves through the red fog as the call reaches Orisha. Orisha's eye widens as she recognizes something about the voice without yet naming its source. Korin reaches through the haze toward Orisha, bloodied but still moving. The bloodied final close-up holds on the unresolved question of whether Korin's voice is Orisha's savior. Orisha's injured eye and red mist establish that the rescue is still active. Korin and Orisha fight through red mist and undead pressure. Orisha, bloodied and exhausted, reaches for Korin's help. Korin steadies Orisha's movement and turns the problem from random swings into deliberate strength. Korin moves in front of the undead as he takes responsibility for protecting Orisha. Korin leans close to Orisha and gives the confidence that leads to her one-step breakthrough. Orisha's eye focuses through the blood and mist as the watching eye becomes usable. Red pressure gives way to the blue-black domain opening around Orisha's next movement. The undead and party figures are caught inside the blue domain as Orisha's path opens. The blade path tears through the blue-black domain and begins the domain slash. Orisha's domain slash cuts across the forest and clears the immediate mist threat. A bloodied, monstrous-looking body lies exposed after the forest is cut open. Orisha celebrates that she truly performed the cut. Korin stands among the aftermath as the scale of Orisha's domain slash is measured by the others. The surrounding public reacts to Orisha's feat and begins attaching her name to a larger house story. Galen's tall, white-haired figure stands at the center of the house hierarchy. Lunia's dark-haired swordswoman silhouette is framed against the house's blue training light. Lunia sits among fallen training opponents with her sword still in hand. Lunia and young Arisha clash during the early sister dueling memory. Young Arisha grips the sword through tears while the house's neglect hangs over the memory. Lunia attacks through the training exchange with the hard-earned discipline of the older sister. The sisters' blades meet in the house training room, making rivalry and family inseparable. Lunia's face registers that Arisha's movement cannot be explained by speed alone. Arisha lies bloodied after being cut before she can understand the domain movement. Arisha faces forward with both eye effects visible as the talent Lunia cannot explain emerges. Lunia's bloodied, intense expression as she understands the demon-like nature of Arisha's sword talent. Galen places a hand on young Arisha and announces her as a house heir candidate. Young Arisha proudly holds the sword and tells Lunia about her first successful hold. Present-day Lunia sits composed in the house while the succession consequence settles around her. House staff and attendants gather around Lunia as the public feat becomes a house matter. Lunia sits in the house and calmly explains that seeing Arisha's blade might let her take a step further. The house group prepares for the breaking of the sword as the next political consequence forms. Corin visits Arisha in the recovery room after the domain/rescue. Corin studies Arisha's result and questions how the watching eye became a usable domain/ so quickly. Arisha smiles and credits Corin's belief for helping her take the step. Corin and Arisha share the lighter recovery room moment after the impossible rescue. Marie Donarev stands at the recovery bed with Corin and Arisha as she introduces herself. Marie and Corin react to the Horan reference, with Marie visibly uneasy. Corin's red-lit eyes signal that he is already calculating a response to the house threat. Corin, Arisha, and the recovery room group discuss the breaking of the sword and Lunia's expected response. Arisha cries that Lunia will kill her and that she cannot defeat the 5 blades. Corin raises a hand and says he has an idea for surviving the next house conflict. A dark-haired figure looks up beneath the proposed fixed party and obedience condition. The small group stands together after a solemn oath of loyalty is accepted. A dark-clothed challenger steps into the blue-lit training hall street. The challenger drives a sudden strike through the blue-lit encounter. Corin is caught in the immediate exchange as the new technique tests his defense. Waran appears in chained dark clothing with red eyes and the knife training silhouette. Waran's technique is shown in a blue-lit knife exchange as Corin reacts to the pairing knife technique claim. Weapons collide under the blue nightlight as the challenge remains unresolved. Corin fights back inside the fast blue-lit exchange. Corin names himself while the blue technique continues around his blade. Corin's red-eyed challenge pose holds as he requests a dueling lesson from Noble Waveblade Rina. Corin Loke occupies the planning scene as the hall's expansion becomes an active strategy. Marie Dunarev is framed as the backer whose spending keeps the fledgling hall moving. The hall's fighters and public-facing activity form a single reputation-building push. Lunia Aiden enters the hall-side scene while Arisha turns toward her older sister. Lunia steps into the challenge space and immediately controls the encounter's attention. Arisha faces Lunia in a tense sister-to-sister standoff. Lunia's calm acceptance sets the terms of the duel. Lunia stands ready for the lethal exchange. Marie's vampire presence fills the frame as she measures Lunia's danger. Corin and Marie share the quiet support moment before the duel. Marie's close reaction holds the financial and emotional weight of the hall's next step. Lunia launches the first attack of the lethal sister duel. Corin receives the reconstruction support while the duel's consequences are already visible around the hall. Arisha and Lunia meet in the first large sword impact. Arisha's memory frames Lunia as the older sister she once admired. The house setting places Arisha's family position beneath the attention paid to Lunia. Young Arisha celebrates Lunia in the childhood memory. Young Arisha's eye and face hold the memory from her own point of view. A red-toned injured figure and young Arisha mark the unresolved memory of the first person she hurt. Arisha cries within the red memory as the story turns back toward the present fight. Lunia drives the first blue-lit attack toward Arisha. The blue/line shows the danger Arisha must redirect rather than absorb. Arisha's eye focuses as she prepares to change the attack's course. Arisha redirects the incoming line instead of meeting it straight on. The sisters' blades meet again after Arisha changes the angle. Arisha follows through on the redirected movement and keeps the exchange alive. Arisha's face shows the effort of holding the new rhythm under Lunia's pressure. Arisha dashes through the gap she created. A close impact records one of Arisha's advancing entries against Lunia. Arisha advances again, keeping Lunia from resetting comfortably. Arisha turns through the vertical exchange and keeps her body moving past the expected line. The advancing sequence produces another hard contact between the sisters. Lunia answers the approach and keeps the exchange from becoming a one-sided advance. Arisha and Lunia remain locked inside the named technique sequence. A downward attack carries the advancement pressure into another angle. The consecutive skill attack continues before Lunia can settle the distance. Arisha regains position inside the exchange after the advancement sequence. Blue-black domain pressure surrounds the sisters as the fight crosses into a new state. The sisters continue the clash inside the deepening domain imagery. Blades and blue-black light compress the distance between Arisha and Lunia. Arisha's face holds the realization that she is seeing the domain. Lunia's close reaction recognizes the buried talent she has wanted to see. Arisha steadies herself as the next exchange becomes decisive. A sister stands ready inside the domain-lit dual space. Arisha's figure holds inside the blue-black domain as the decisive exchange approaches. The present duel flashes through blue domain light and impact. Lunia's domain-lit sword action answers the memory of the knight Arisha once admired. Young Arisha smiles toward the brave knight ideal she associates with Lunia. A blade detail makes the final technique line legible inside the domain. Blue-white light opens through the compressed combat space. The domain/exchange lands in a blue impact that closes the action montage. Corin and Marie look toward the aftermath as the duel's energy falls away. Arisha stands over the defeated Lunia at the end of the duel. Lunia's face remains present after the loss. Corin and injured Arisha share the immediate aftermath of the tactical win. Arisha, injured but upright, absorbs the fact that she did it. Lunia stands after the duel and controls her own response to the loss. Arisha looks toward Lunia with fear of what the victory may do to the family. Lunia's glance softens the immediate confrontation. Arisha's injured face remains uncertain even after Lunia's calm response. Lunia walks through the prior life recollection before the Marie incident. An unidentified attacker appears in the prior life murder memory. Rain falls over Arisha's grave in the prior life account. Corin and Lunia share the rain-soaked grave conversation. Lunia faces the grave and carries both resentment and a promise to avenge her sister. Lunia's present-day face holds the decision to support Arisha's growth. Lunia holds the injured Arisha in a direct sisterly comfort moment. Corin watches the sister's support moment with a quiet smile. Arisha cries as the victory's emotional meaning catches up with her. The church exterior marks the quieter recovery conversation after the duel. Corin tends to Arisha during her recovery. Corin and Arisha remain together in the hospital-like recovery setting. Corin reflects on fear and the courage he once lacked. Arisha faces the fear that future airship could damage her bond with Lunia. Corin's eye holds the seriousness of the worth lesson. The Forest Savior memory gives Arisha the visual clue behind Corin's voice and belt. Corin accepts that Arisha can no longer be asked to ignore what she recognized. A hand reaches across the recovery space as Corin asks Arisha to be friends. Corin and Arisha remain together after accepting the new friendship. Corin smiles at the awkward but genuine friendship resolution. Arisha smiles as the friendship becomes mutual. Lunia and Arisha appear in the symbolic transition toward future adventures. Isabel Carmen appears at a doorway as the new observer of Marie's circle. Marie receives attention from an unnamed young blood offering admirer. The earnest blood-related offering is shown as the fragment Isabel misreads. Marie jumps through the comic blood and investment misunderstanding. Marie's face holds the actual investor conversation behind the rumor. Corin and Marie share the group scene in which the business plan is being discussed. The locked door comedy shows Isabel's intrusive observation colliding with the group. Corin and Marie sit in the actual in-investment conversation. Corin leads Arisha through basic practice after the duel. Arisha practices the basics rather than repeating the duel's finishing technique. Corin and Arisha share a meal as Isabel's romantic interpretation begins to grow. Isabel reacts dramatically to the ordinary restaurant interaction. Corin and Arisha walk on as the money questions continue. Isabel watches Corin move between named and unnamed people and imagines a scheme. Corin shares a dining hall table with a long-haired, dark-clad companion whose name is not supplied. Isabel's glasses and eye carry the final intensity of her misinterpretation. The long-haired, dark-clad companion is shown again without a direct name tag. A step onto the empty land begins Corin's field purchase sequence. The outskirts field stretches empty under the sky. A future festival crowd shows why tourists could create demand for lodging. Corin stands confidently with the information advantage behind the future inn plan. The Academy Administration building opens the institutional closing scene. The director and office officials occupy the administrative room. Two officials face one another as the Academy decision and absence handoff are discussed. The administrative room and paperwork frame the institutional review. A reviewer turns through paperwork after the regeneration and dormitory decisions. The reviewer reacts with shock after finding the request concerning Corin Loke. Isabel Carmen reacts to the new request carrying Corin Loke's name. The Academy facility establishes the experiment wing fieldwork setting. Corin and Arisha prepare the wide empty harvest site. Corin and Arisha pull the mandrake while coordinating the cut. Korin looks nervous beside Arisha despite his prior mandrake experience. The first mandrake scream overwhelms the harvest scene. Korin and Arisha are thrown into the comic aftermath of the scream. The mandrake is flung through the chaotic solo harvest. Korin finishes the harvest alone after Arisha cannot respond. Korin reacts angrily to Arisha's casual question after his collapse. Arisha helps Korin as the team acknowledges the cost of continuing. Korin holds the harvested plant while admitting that the silver mandrake would be too much for him. Marie arrives at the harvest site with effortless confidence. Arisha and Marie stand together at the harvest site after Marie's unusual entrance. Korin and Marie discuss why the harvest is stopping and who can finish it. Marie reaches for the silver mandrake that Korin could not safely continue toward. The silver mandrake's face makes its scream danger visible. Marie bites into the harvested plant with practiced calm. Marie begins the stew while the harvest team divides the remaining ingredients. Korin reacts to the cooking plan and the sudden shift from combat-style work to food preparation. Marie works confidently over the stew. Korin relaxes into the improvised meal and harvest camp. Arisha tends the long boiling preparation. The decoction is poured into the prepared container. The group gathers around the finished preparation. Marie asks Korin about the rune letters visible on the preparation. Korin considers the familiar rune letters without claiming to understand their meaning. Rune and spear imagery begins to surface as Korin's past knowledge expands. The rune body engraving concept appears in the memory. The infinite sphere memory turns the rune discussion into a larger power system image. A red and black hand image marks the danger around the rune's past. Korin returns from the memory to Marie's offer of potatoes. Korin and Marie continue the rune conversation beside the prepared food. Marie reacts to the sadness behind Korin's master memory. Dioku appears as Marie's now fully controlled familiar. Korin and Marie stand with Dioku as the blood joke takes shape. Dioku's face holds the familiar's comic energy. Marie sends Dioku toward Korin for an energetic play session. Korin tries to handle Dioku as the familiar's energy keeps rising. Dioku's energetic movement exhausts Korin. The harvest camp collapses into comic familiar chaos. The finished decoction boils as the group announces it is ready. Korin and the group register the immediate result of the drink. Korin eats the silver mandrake whole after drinking the decoction. Blue aura energy gathers around Korin as the new core forms. Korin's blue aura is visible to the group after the core forms. Korin holds the decision to save the golden mandrake for a later use. Academy officials debate Korin's tear around the council chamber. A sunglasses-wearing official weighs the evidence from Korin's duel. Another council member doubts whether Lunia went easy on Korin. The council group weighs a formal path instead of an informal rank upgrade. An official considers the certificate prerequisite for a league determination. The sunglasses-wearing instructor accepts responsibility for the proposed evaluation. A stylized technique image supports the separate official's promise of another evaluation. Arisha greets Korin as the class routine resumes. Jaeger stands as Arisha approaches the seat. Jaeger permits Arisha to take the seat while the class reacts. Jaeger glares toward Korin after allowing Arisha to stay. An unnamed student is used as the visual object of the classmates' Potato Girl commentary. Another unnamed background figure illustrates the narrator's exaggerated description. The unnamed male classmate reacts to Korin receiving attention. The black-haired instructor with sunglasses enters the first-year classroom. The instructor moves into position at the front of the room. The instructor stands at the podium before distributing the project papers. Magic distributes the group project papers through the classroom. Korin reacts as the topic of the project becomes clear. A spear technique drawing fills the class handout. Arisha and Korin react together to the random spear project topic. Fermac Damon stands in the classroom, as the profile identifies his boxer and instructor role. Fermac's close profile carries the range control, dash, shadow, and rune gauntlet reputation. Fermac watches the first years after assigning the spear project. Fermac Damon stands at the lectern as the spear technique project is assigned. A hand reaches toward the container used to assign 4-person groups by lot. A comic group illustration visualizes the class project as a shared task. Korin's old group project memory is represented by a comic pile of students. Korin looks exhausted by the familiar pattern of unreliable group work. Korin's expression changes when he realizes this group may be different. The classroom visual introduces the 4 students who will work together. Jaeger Hinspeter reacts with confidence to sharing a group with Korin. Arisha reacts to the lot change that cost her 20 silver coins. Waran's severe expression establishes the final teammate's cold first impression. Korin plans the training room meeting and prepares to organize the project. The training room fills with dust and debris after the first impact. Cracks spread across the supposedly shock-absorbent floor beneath the team. Arisha and Waran stand amid the broken floor after the failed light duel. Waran remains composed while Korin processes how far the practice session went. The group is forced out of the training room and must find another place to practice. The church setting replaces the destroyed training room for the next group meeting. Waran apologizes for losing control during the previous day's practice. Jaeger studies the movement he cannot yet reproduce. Waran listens from the church bench as the group reviews its progress. The four teammates sit together despite the destroyed room setback. Korin asks Waran about her religious training while she serves the group. The church table and shared food hold the conversation in an ordinary meeting space. Korin frames the new order lesson around love and reciprocity. Waran and Arisha absorb the lesson in different ways as the team prepares to continue. Waran looks directly at the group before explaining why the practice failed. The teammates react as Waran calls them weak and fragile. Korin steps into the disagreement instead of answering with another lecture. Korin and Waran face one another as the wager takes shape. Korin offers 1 minute and dinner as the concrete consequence. Waran accepts while warning that Korin will be badly hurt if she wins. The duel begins with a fast movement through the church practice space. Jaeger's cue places Korin and Waran opposite one another while the group watches. Waran's eye tightens as she commits to the opening exchange. Korin's focus narrows as he reads the incoming technique. The first name technique cuts across the frame as the duel accelerates. Waran's attack meets Korin's guard rather than passing cleanly through it. A sweeping attack carries the visible horizontal sweeping tiger wind sequence forward. Korin snaps into the next movement instead of surrendering the distance. The duel becomes a blur of repositioning and pressure. The exchange layers footwork, evasive movement, and weaponless counters. Korin is driven across the space as he searches for a way through Waran's power. Waran launches Blaze, the straight punch Korin believes could hospitalize him. Korin chooses a block instead of the dodge Waran expected. Korin uses footwork and body positioning to get around the attack. The block succeeds, but Korin's muscles are still visibly damaged. Waran realizes Korin has accepted the impact instead of dodging it. Korin reaches the angle behind Waran as the 1 minute wager turns. Korin puts Waran down within the promised minute. Korin treats the kneeling result as a fair win. Waran demands another round while the teammates react around them. Waran's anger remains visible after Korin refuses the rematch. Korin dismisses the demand and jokes that he can hear Waran shaking. Waran's glare makes clear that the argument is not settled. Korin reads the note claiming Waran is hurt and asking the group to continue without her. Korin decides that Waran's withdrawal leaves him no choice but to use his ultimate card. Korin brings Waran to a Japanese restaurant for the next stage of his plan. Korin places the elaborate fish dish in front of Waran and tells her to eat. Waran begins eating despite the argument she brought into the restaurant. The finished dish makes Korin's comparison between preparation and practice tangible. Korin watches Waran eat while keeping the conversation focused on recovery and choice. The meal becomes a quiet negotiation rather than another physical confrontation. The restaurant's finished plate stands in for the years of preparation behind a polished result. Korin compares the chef's 10 years with the 3 years it took him to make Waran kneel. Korin turns ingredients and preparation into the martial lesson of taking the right stance before a strike. Waran reacts when Korin's ultimate card turns into a request to look at her work. Korin checks the material Waran has prepared instead of treating her as absent. Korin reacts sharply when he sees the notebook of spear stances and principles. Waran holds the notebook that covers the research portion of the project. Korin pats Waran in approval, and Waran immediately pushes back on the contact. The exterior returns as the narration moves from the finished meal to the passage of time. The classroom is ready for the first week of group project presentations. The first team steps forward as the presentations officially begin. Felis identifies himself as Team 1's leader. Team 1 demonstrates the 5-spear technique in front of the class. Fermac watches the demonstration and gives a brief positive comment to Felice. A purple-lit challenge visual closes the episode as Fermac offers full marks for anyone who lasts 10 seconds. Fermac frames the combat assignment in the classroom and raises the stakes of surviving 10 seconds. The first unnamed team raises its weapons and prepares to defend against the instructor. Fermac closes the distance on a first defender with a burst of speed. Fermac sends the first group to the floor during the live defense test. Classmates react to how quickly Fermac overwhelms the defenders. Fermac writes the first group's evaluation after the practical exchange. The first group lies on the floor while Fermac delivers the passable assessment that becomes a B. The remaining students watch the result and brace for their own turn. Team 2 presents a visually loud spear form with the group name kept at roll-only scope. The flashy Team 2 performance breaks down under Fermac's practical pressure and receives a C. Korin steps into view as the named leader of the next team. Korin, Jaeger, Arisha, and Waran form Team 3 for the named spear technique demonstration. Jaeger drives the first thrust into the opening of the coordinated form. Arisha yanks the opposing weapon downward to create the next opening. Waran plunges through the forced opening and completes the team's sequence. Waran's controlled finish makes her improvement visible to Korin and the evaluator. Furmak records the group's precise and elegant performance before changing the practical requirement. Team 3 reacts as Furmak restricts the practical test to Korin alone. Furmak steps forward to make Korin the sole defender in the practical examination. Korin accepts the one-on-one challenge without claiming that he will overpower Furmak. Furmak opens the practical duel with a focused boxing stance and sudden speed. Korin meets Furmak's first rush instead of reacting blindly to the attack's surface rhythm. Furmak drives a powerful strike through the apparent right-handed rhythm. Furmak continues the boxing attack that invites a predictable block from the right. Korin tracks Furmak's rotation onto the left foot, the clue behind the apparent right-handed attack. The duel folds the group's thrusting yank plunge back into the practical test as a panel local second technique display. Furmak reacts with visible surprise as Korin reads the structure of the attack. Unnamed observers notice that Furmak is fighting Korin differently from the earlier groups. Korin and Furmak collide as the instructor raises the pressure on the defensive framework. The one-on-one exchange becomes a sustained chain of impacts, rather than a simple classroom demonstration. Furmak increases pressure and demands that Korin show what the research technique can do. Korin applies the team's spear framework to defend under direct pressure. Korin keeps reading Furmak's movement instead of chasing a flashy counter. Another impact carries the fight toward its timed endpoint. Furmak and the teammates register how long Korin has held the defense. The impact clears into smoke as the practical exchange reaches its decisive pause. Arisha watches closely as Korin's solo defense approaches the required 10 seconds. Furmak is guarded and kneeling while Korin remains standing at the timed endpoint. Furmak questions why Korin never tried to make a move. Korin answers that the 10 seconds are over, making the test's actual condition explicit. Korin explains that his guard was built around knowing Furmak was left-handed from the beginning. The remembered right arm display contrasts with the left foot structure Korin actually used to defend. Korin's defense absorbs the pressure because he read the stance underneath Furmak's feint. Furmak turns from the duel toward Team 3 to record the group's result. The full Team 3 formation is visible again as Furmak addresses the group after the test. Furmak directs the final assessment to Korin as Team 3's leader. Korin raises an arm as the teammates celebrate the A+ result together. All 4 Team 3 members celebrate the shown A+ for everyone. Furmak reassures Korin that staying after class is only a conversation at first. Furmak keeps Korin after class, opening the formal status conversation that follows. Furmak questions whether Korin is really a 5th-tier knight. Furmak weighs Korin's combat talent while the recorded tier remains unchanged. Furmak absorbs Korin's stated limitation that he cannot perceive spirits under normal circumstances. Furmak reports that the Knight Department professors concluded Korin should be reevaluated. The proposed reevaluation is framed as missions rather than another classroom grade. Korin weighs the semi-first-tier ceiling against the pay and mission selection benefits of higher tiers. Korin accepts the 2 solo missions as a chance to test whether an upgrade is justified. 4 Guardians League mission options appear, divided between demonic beasts and demonic spirits. Furmak presents the precarious choice. Korin must capture 1 beast and 1 spirit to complete the test. Korin arrives in a foggy forest for the first reassessment mission. Instructor Harmon receives Korin and walks with him through the gloomy mission site. Harmon recalls marching toward a demonic beast nest in thicker fog when he was young. The target group is visualized as a not fully grown twin-headed ogre with long hounds. Korin questions why this twin-headed ogre is classified as semi-first tier instead of first tier. Harmon explains that a guardian needs more than brute strength and that he will assess every choice Korin makes. The mountain region west of the city becomes the setting for the cave approach. Harmon and the unnamed Guardians League members accompany Korin as backup but do not take over the test. Harmon asks Korin what he has analyzed before the hunt begins. Korin identifies the ogre and hound relationship and counts 3 long hounds while the backup group observes. Korin studies the repeated footprints around the cave and recognizes the ogre's movement with long hounds. Korin crouches over the tracks and notices signs that hunted animals were dragged back to the base. Harmon acknowledges Korin's correct reasoning while the backup group remains an observing presence. The target pack is held as a dangerous group, while Harmon asks how Korin would approach it. Korin proposes separating the ogre from its hounds instead of meeting the group head-on. Korin and Harmon face the cave as Korin frames his brain as the most powerful weapon. The closing fiery image frames Korin as confident in tactical analysis before the beast hunt begins. A secluded forest waits beneath the wider world's lingering demonic threat. Demonic creatures still survive beyond human influence, hidden in the wild. The forest ruler announces its strength through a crushing close-range blow. The twin-headed ogre rules the forest like a tyrant above its hounds. The long hounds are the first to sense an intruder moving through their territory. Their search finds the female's resting place, but the space is empty. The pack pushes through the forest, searching for the missing female's scent. The forest's alarm narrows to one fact: their female has been taken. The ogre and hounds launch together, with the forest ruler close behind, turning recovery into a personal hunt. The hounds follow the scent at full speed through the trees. The pursuit accelerates as the pack closes on the female's stronger scent. At the end of the trail, a long hound whines on the ground. The pack reaches the clearing, ready to pull their female away. The males rub noses with her, confirming that the female is alive and unharmed. The attempted escape meets a hidden restraint, snapping tight around the pack. Explosive impacts tear through the hounds before anyone can identify their attacker. The surviving hounds recoil as the trap removes the pack's protection. The unseen attack keeps pounding the group instead of confronting the ogre directly. Even the hound's desperate charge is answered by another violent collision. Snapping restraints continue to break the pack apart around the female. One hound is left facing the danger, while the ogre's rage becomes personal. The ogre takes over the pursuit and drives through the forest after its unseen enemy. Huglis rains down, striking the forest ruler without revealing its source. The surviving hound reaches open ground, expecting the clearing to offer safety. Instead, the ogre is forced to search a burning battlefield for a bodiless threat. Another distant strike keeps the ogre moving while the attacker stays out of reach. The small harassment gives way to a fiery boulder that floods the area with flame. Across 3 days, the forest itself becomes the casualty of the pursuit. At last, a human silhouette appears in the flames, exposing the hunter's species. Even with 2 heads for sight and smell, the ogre cannot locate its prey. After another night attack, the human shape remains just out of reach while the forest burns behind it. The ogre's anger grows because every trace leads to another empty distance. Another strike lands, keeping the monster trapped inside the hunter's rhythm. The exhausted battlefield shows that the chase has become a losing war of attrition. The final harassment forces the forest tyrant to admit it is being hunted. On the 3rd day, the ogre realizes that it has been the prey all along. The hidden hunter steps forward at last, no longer needing distance or cover. Korin Loke is finally revealed, yawning as he promises to finish the ogre. Korin launches upward, turning the ogre's final pursuit into a direct duel. The ogre answers with its oversized birchwood club and swings for Korin. Blue-white force drives into the ogre as Korin begins his named technique sequence. Mountain Destroyer lands with enough force to overwhelm the forest tyrant. Infallible single attack follows, driving the impact through both heads. Massive strike hammers the body, ending the ogre's control of the forest. The final exchange overwhelms the twin-headed forest ogre completely. Korin's named blue-white finishing technique becomes the decisive visual of the hunt. The impact lands on the ogre, and the human hunter wins the reversal. After the defeat, Korin complains that his filled aura core never became necessary. 3 days earlier, Korin brings Marie into a private conversation about trust. Marie enthusiastically promises she will believe anything Korin says. When Korin says all the way, Marie turns the request into a romantic misunderstanding. Korin clarifies that he needs Marie's help with a plan, not a confession. Marie accepts the request, even as the mention of Arisha makes her jealous. Korin says Marie and Arisha will become part of the operation starting tomorrow. The flashback re-anchors Korin as the planner carrying a long weapon over his shoulder. The operation moves into Merkava Academy, where access and research matter more than spectacle. The Western Experiment Building leads the group toward a sealed beast chamber. Inside waits a giant special-tier demonic beast that the Academy could not kill. Professor Dana studies the alpha trait and the energy special tiers possess. Professor Fermac is recruited to engrave runes on the sealed special-tier beast. Fermac explains that rune users are rare and practical rune work is difficult. The specialists now stand beside the containment setup, ready for an experiment not yet performed. Marie's arrival supplies the special-tier ally the Academy operation needs. The meeting is framed as one special-tier boss confronting the next chapter's boss, and the story points toward the unnamed king of Iron Mountain. Korin begins the notorious haunted house mission beneath a cold full moon. The possessed house launches hazards, but Korin follows his remembered route. He jumps through the first attack instead of wasting time fighting the room. His spear drives through the stem and upper root core of the haunted threat. Korin slides under the next hazard as the house throws its furniture at him. He enters the correct doorway while the mission keeps trying to slow him down. Korin reaches the remembered floorboard point and breaks the hidden magic circle. Broken terrace glass becomes another obstacle in the route Korin already knows. The memorized sequence carries him through the final room without hesitation. In roughly 30 seconds, Korin clears a mission feared by hardcore players. 88 years earlier, the harsh Dingle Peninsula was rich in natural resources. The legendary Iron Mountain King was first described as a dark boar-like beast devouring the region's mines. A giant boar-like fiend devours the mine and everything in its path. The mine's historical catastrophe becomes the experiment wing's modern containment target. Arisha races to the experiment wing because Korin entrusted this operation to her. Marie meets Arisha in the room and begins explaining what Korin planned. Marie says she was using spare time to prepare a purple mixture. Arisha explains that Dioku directed her here, keeping his role off-screen. Marie makes clear that Korin asked her to explain the next experiment. The women move toward the cage-lined experiment floor where the theory becomes dangerous. Multiple cages and circles surround the researchers on the fourth basement containment floor. The operation gathers researchers, cages, and magic circles around the sealed beast test. Dana's theory begins inside a facility built to hold dangerous demonic creatures. The team compares demonic beasts, spirits, and humans before testing a special tier rule. Marie listens as Dana explains why special tier dominance might reach lower creatures. If the alpha trait worked freely, humans could control many demonic threats. Professor Dana and Marie face the live test as the theory becomes operational. Dana is the researcher trying to turn special tier power into a measurable effect. The researchers surround the cages because any successful command can become a breach. Dana starts with fanged boars as the simplest same family command sample. Marie's eyes turn red as she orders the boars to lie face down. The command leaves the boars moving unpredictably instead of obeying her. The low-tier beasts fail to understand the order, proving power alone is not communication. Fermac removes the first seal, and the Iron Mountain King answers with blue-white force. Marie faces the same family king, and the team sees control arrive quickly. The alarm identifies Cage A107's separate threat, a manticore lunging into the wing. Marie answers the manticore with a red spears of blood barrage. Professor Dana intercepts the breach with southpaw screw demolition. His left straight buys the operator's time, but the manticore is not declared captured. Dana senses the failure spreading as cages begin to shake across the floor. Staff report that someone damaged the magic circle and the binding system is failing. Fermac orders evacuation and the pressure circle, but the emergency spells struggle to activate. The golden chains snap, and the King of the Iron Mountain is out. Port City Sally appears as a bright harbor before the Academy crisis returns. Harmon brings Korin to a raw fish soup restaurant to celebrate his advancement. Korin jokes about finally sharing a first drink with an elder he respects. Korin explains that 3 years as Korin Loke left him technically underage. Harmon answers as an instructor before accepting Korin's request for guidance. Korin pours the glass, turning the meal into a personal first drink ritual. Harmon recognizes that Korin wants more than alcohol, he wants elder recognition. The quiet celebration is poised to continue when a disturbance cuts across the room. A red dog-like demonic creature appears inside the restaurant after the barking. Back at the Academy, the King of the Iron Mountain is still chained. The Iron Mountain King and failing containment remain visibly active as the Academy crisis resumes. More restraints fail as the Academy's contained threat pushes toward freedom. The Iron Mountain King emerges as the Academy crisis becomes active present danger. Marie's crystal lance shatters against the king without leaving a visible wound. Marie and the Academy responders register that the first attack did nothing. Dana drives a purple energy strike into the king and finds no resistance response. Dana says he did not feel anything against his fist after the direct blow. The king remains physically unharmed while the Academy's containment zone deteriorates. Thurisaz Fehu appears as the violent counterforce tears through the containment area. The barcode system is also failing as the Academy loses control of its safeguards. Code Veronica reports that every sealed demonic beast has escaped the building. Released demonic creatures flood the Academy as guards activate remaining circles. The released beast roster includes a huge serpent moving through the Academy. The colossal sacred snake is identified as the first-tier beast King Hylant. Fermac authorizes consecutive lightning strikes across the communal area. The lightning response turns the communal area into a violent, costly battlefield. The localized king release has become a full facility crisis beyond one containment room. A long-haired woman recognizes Mr. Worski among the emergency responders. Worski calls the intervention a little field trip before giving the attack command. Colored weapon-like attacks sweep through the escaped creatures on Worski's command. The intervention culminates in a large explosion across the Academy emergency zone. The Academy remains an active battlefield even after the first wave of attacks. Cranel combines remains to construct a new combat golem for the Academy response. The assembled form is revealed as the Extreme Success Golem, Junk Golem. Cranel celebrates that Korin's equation produced a form he can control perfectly. Korin's library-found golem equation is credited with making the experiment possible. A first-tier beast drives the initial junk golem backward in the first exchange. Crenel keeps the controlled golem in the fight despite the first-tier pressure. Root reinforcement begins changing the junk golem toward a wooden combat form. Yule arrives as the druid of Avalorn Forest to reinforce the emergency golem. Yule asks how Corin knew the nature reinforcement would work here. Yule layers nature reinforcement over the golem while combat continues around them. A combat call marks the moment the druid's reinforcement reaches the fight. The responders regroup around the plan Corin prepared before the breach. The field trip group and academy responders share the same dangerous operation. The coordinated response is described as carrying out the absent boy's plan. The upgraded response enters a direct golem versus monster exchange. Yule explains that 5 spirit golem cores in Corin's equation power the form. Crenel orders Ul to reinforce the outer layer before the core release. Crenel forces the 5 absorbed cores toward one concentrated release of magic. The 5 spirit cores enter a forced frenzy and flood the golem with power. Yule equips Nature Weapon, Wooden Fist for the final upgraded attack. The reinforced Wooden Fist drives the golem toward its named finishing form. Elbow Rocket launches the Master Form Golem through the final attack line. The Elbow Rocket strike reaches the first-tier beast in a burst of force. The collision fills the arena, but the chapter still withholds the monster's final status. Master Form Junk Wooden Golem, Elbow Rocket is the named upgraded configuration. The response team reacts to the controlled form's successful high-output counterattack. Yule and the formed warrior are framed as the ideal heroic Legends of Arhon team. Port City Sal opens the chapter as Corin's deliberate haunted house mission destination. Corin approaches a chapel while a large red figure waits nearby. The red figure whines as Corin tells it to wait outside the chapel. Corin enters under an academy student cover story, explains the mission made him miss weekend mass, and asks for the prayer room. Permission granted, Corin reaches the prayer room where the marker is hidden. Corin recognizes the marker from memory and opens contact with purple energy. A pointed ear shadowed entity asks how Corin knows the marker. The helper warns Corin to think carefully before he answers. Corin postpones the questions because the urgent business must come first. A voice calls the construct Ludun Warrior, and another reacts to its new name. Arisha is startled by the unfamiliar construct and the expanding academy fight. The colossal sacred snake stands as the first-tier threat Arisha must face. Arisha accepts the snake fight while Marie relays Corin's no domain/instruction. Arisha triggers Domain of Blood as a new academy threat closes in. The domain attack intersects the parallel beast fight in a burst of force. A cry calls out Marie as the detached combat panels leave the injury source uncertain. The Iron Mountain Swine's rune is described as granting total physical and magical resistance. The legendary swine was sealed because many heroes died trying to kill it. Marie continues the desperate stand against the legendary demonic swine. Alchemic spell, Snowflower gives Marie another way to hold the line. Marie is struggling, yet the special tier clash remains visibly even enough to continue. The King of the Iron Mountain keeps pressing while Marie holds her ground. The special tier confrontation has become an academy-scale historical event. Professor Dana can only watch the special tier collision with fear and awe. The view widens again as the students try to keep the escaping beasts inside. Arisha raises multiple shield, bloody snow barricade against the escaping beasts. The students hold the line while the academy's beast pressure keeps rising. The responders realize they are losing ground despite the barricade. The barrier absorbs another surge while the students continue preventing escape. A red armored figure arrives carrying Marie through the battle. Dioku moves Marie through the danger while the other students keep fighting. Arisha asks what Corin would do instead of relying on domain/. Dioku's red armor and Marie's carried position remain visible amid the emergency. Arisha chooses a basic dodge and slash route under Corin's restriction. Aiden-style single-blade Soaring Sky begins its clean counterattack. Soaring Sky lands, but the chapter does not claim King Hylant is finished. Arisha stands after managing the sequence without domain/. Corin returns to find the group still fighting across the academy. Corin observes that the group appears to have been killing it. Crenel celebrates that his golem destroyed a beast and boasts about Ludun Warrior. Yule's presence shows the successful golem response was not Crenel alone. Corin assesses King Hylant and asks where the demonic swine is. The chapel contact appears at the academy and asks what Corin intends to do. Corin assigns the chapel helper to catch the demonic swine while others handle the rest. A flashback shows rune-engraved stones being planted through ordinary feeding. Marie's feeding task places the rune stones inside the demonic beast population. The embedded runes begin resonating through the containment grid. A silver spear crafted from runestones joins the resonance mechanism. The resonance separates the lower-tier population from the stronger survivors. Arisha runs toward the upper-tier survivors gathering after the resonance. Upper-tier demonic beasts that survive the resonance begin gathering together. A horned silhouette hints at the special tier survivor without naming it. Korin tells the group there is no need to get nervous before round 2. A silver-haired fur-collared figure calls Korin employer and mentions Doron. The new contact tells the Dream Team to stop celebrating and come over. The major heroic legends of Arhan NPCs now share one place. Marie checks that everyone is alright before the counterattack begins. Round 2 is announced. This time, the assembled team will strike back. Round 2 begins with the assembled team facing a legendary beast. The history montage recalls destruction and a beast that offered no mercy. The Ludun warrior charges despite warnings not to face the swine head-on. The direct charge is overwhelmed before the construct can solve the defense. The team cries for the Ludun warrior as Cranel prepares a different plan. Cranel changes the plan and sends Uel's plants toward the demonic swine. The roots briefly restrain the swine, instead of striking its body directly. The swine's strength breaks the plant restraint as the rune defense reasserts itself. The primal rune remains the central defense problem after the vines fail. Korin sends Doron in from the side instead of repeating a head-on charge. Doron brings fire and lightning arcane blades into the mid-range attack. The arcane blades reach the beast, but its body takes no visible damage. Korin recognizes the pattern and calls for a paired damage solution. The working solution requires equal physical and magical damage together. The primal runes are linked to 8 letters and a route toward paradise. Blue fur resists magical attacks, turning color into a timing signal. Korin assigns restraint, mid-range, rear, and heavy attacker positions. Uel and Cranel begin restraining the king as the attackers take their positions. Doron and the rear attackers time their strikes against the restrained target. For a moment, the coordinated cycle appears to be making progress. The color change is revealed as a ruse designed to draw Dioku out. Dioku is pulled into the king's prepared counterattack. Thurisaz Fehu gathers as a colossal destructive rune around the exposed attacker. The colossal rune detonates through the formation and breaks the planned cycle. The rune blast scatters the formation and draws Dioku away. His condition remains unresolved. Marie retrieves her familiar and prepares Spears of Blood against the king. Spears of Blood launches from Marie toward the golden-bound defense cycle. Korin answers with Mountain Destroyer ultimate technique. The Spears of Blood and Mountain Destroyer converge without finishing the king. Blue stops magic while red stops physical attacks, explaining the failed timing. The paired attack is deflected as the defense reaches complete resistance. The king now resists both physical and magical attacks together. The team realizes that reading the color cycle has not produced a finish. The beast draws out its next phase after the paired strategy fails. The king of the Iron Mountain changes into its golden phase. Its ultimate defense is described as invincible for 5 minutes. Korin orders everyone to run because attacks cannot work during the golden phase. The fur-collared NPC refuses to run and says there is nowhere to go. Wreckage closes the space, leaving the team trapped with the invulnerable king. The Golden King smiles while the team remains cornered inside the wreckage. The Ludun warrior is called forward again against the golden phase. Marie answers with alchemic magic blood frost, but the king remains beyond damage. Neither the wooden giant nor the tiny demonic human spells can damage the king. The golden coat is the last phase of the Dingle Peninsula demonic swine. The last phase turns the danger into an explicit risk of escape from confinement. The Depths of Despair framing repeats the 5-minute final boss mechanic, with the invulnerability pattern controlling the endgame. Korin says the crisis is going according to plan despite the golden defense. Arisha begins the late contingency with a penetration attack against the legendary creature. Aiden-style single blade and domain slash begin, but the chapter cuts before the result. Arisha's penetration attack reaches the golden swine at the fight's turning point. Marie follows with Crimson Spear against the golden defensive ability. The Academy response continues through the evacuation while the chapter withholds the swine's permanent status. A rune without a physical carrier begins moving toward the nearest runestone. The wandering rune settles at the nearest runestone, though custody is not fully shown. Korin reveals that he spent 10 years pretending to be an Academy professor. Academy staff fight to contain escaping demonic beasts while Furmak moves away. Furmak uses the tunnel while the Academy remains in evacuation crisis. Furmak recognizes Korin's spear technique and misclassifies him as a sect nephew. Furmak uses Korin's re-evaluation assignment to send him outside the city. On paper, Korin leaves the city. In secret, the assignment prepares his return. Korin uses Madame Josephine's marker to teleport back instantly. Korin returns and refuses to let Furmak leave with the primal. Korin links Dana's experiment and Marie's incident to the opportunity before naming Furmak enemy. Furmak presses Korin about how he knows the hidden plan. Korin names Furmak Daemon as his enemy and ends the professor pretense. Corin identifies the shadow-rich terrain as Fermac's practical advantage. The lot is set for Corin's Sun Rune countermeasure against the shadow advantage. Corin activates Soilo and turns the prepared lot against the shadow terrain. Runes engraved across the lot remove the easiest shadow-rich terrain advantage. Corin presses the counterattack while Fermac's Shadow Servant absorbs the assault. Fermac's instantaneous movement still surprises Corin despite the Sun Rune field. Corin chains Rado movement to attack around Fermac's shadow defense. 8 trigram footwork lets Corin keep changing angles around Fermac. Southpaw Jet Boost carries Corin through another rapid angle change. Fermac notices the repeated movement and adapts to Corin's fullback exchange. Fermac abandons the playful professor mask and decides to escape the city. Once Fermac chooses escape, he moves before the wider academy can react. Corin challenges Fermac to a duel instead of pursuing a loose exchange. Fermac's high-risk restraint comes from the Shadow Paradise's great warrior tradition. Fermac questions why Corin came alone to a high-stakes confrontation. Corin answers that a duel is a battle between two people. The formal duel is narrowed to Corin and Fermac before their title declarations. Fermac declares himself the first warrior of Taith's Balthazar, King of Paradise. Corin answers as the first spear of Erin Danuar, Queen of Paradise. The named Corin versus Fermac duel begins in a rapid first exchange. The rapid exchange continues, but the chapter ends before victory or defeat is shown. Fermac announces his warrior title before the sacred duel proceeds. Corin answers as the first spear of Erin Danuar, Queen of Paradise. The lineage-based introductions turn the earlier challenge into an active duel. Both fighters settle into the sacred one-on-one confrontation. The duel opens across a fractured impact space as the two fighters reset their distance. Fermac uses Rado to erase the distance where Corin's spear is strongest. Corin answers the approach with Poisonous Snake and the snake's Deceit. The returning spear keeps Corin's range advantage from disappearing completely. Fermac keeps pressing toward the distance where a boxer can answer the spear. Corin launches Infinite Whirling Sky above Fermac's approach. Spear of War carries the aerial attack through the transition to landing. Fermac waits for Corin's landing window and prepares the counter. Spear of War carries the aerial attack through the transition to landing. Neither fighter converts the landing window into a decisive result. The aerial exchange leaves the duel unresolved before the next escalation. Fermac answers with Southpaw Flicker Jab while Corin searches for the opening. Meteor Strike raises the danger as both fighters attack through injury. The high-risk collision leaves both fighters committed to the next exchange despite injury. Corin notices Fermac's hand opening around the attack that can seize the spear. Fermac grabs Corin's spear and collapses the long-range advantage. The spear is thrown away, forcing Corin into the boxer's preferred distance. Corin tries to recall the spear, but it is embedded too deeply to respond immediately. Fermac presses close while Corin prepares to replace the spear with martial arts. Corin uses 8 trigram Uplifting Palm as the spearless counter. Thrice-piercing palm disrupts Fermac's expectation of an easy, weaponless win. Fermac admits Corin's boxing is weaker than his spear skill. Fermac chains Southpaw Flicker Jab and Southpaw Liver Punch through the opening. Corin appears to stop defending, as Fermac adds Jet straight to the pressure. Elbow closes the boxing sequence while Fermac believes the duel is ready to end. Fermac presses the close combat advantage, while the spear remains embedded. Corin steers the exchange toward the spear Fermac threw away. Fermac realizes the discarded spear was part of Corin's lure. The snake's Deceit converts Fermac's confidence into another spear counter. Fermac admits Corin has regained an advantage, but the duel remains unresolved. Fermac acknowledges Corin's textbook responses before deciding to end things. Tiwaz, Othala, and Ingwaz appear as Fermac escalates beyond ordinary boxing. Semi-summoning Paradise creates the named Citadel of Shadows around the duel. Fermac threatens Corin with the demonic beasts of Paradise or his own fist. Corin expected the escalation and reveals a prepared last resort. The Golden Mandrake appears as Corin's counter to the Shadow Sphere. The Golden Mandrake's scream overwhelms the shadow demonic beasts. Fermac is visibly affected by the scream, but he remains present in the duel. Corin vows Fermac will die here, but the duel's outcome remains unresolved. The Golden Mandrake's scream clears the immediate Shadow Beast pressure. The summoned beasts are pushed back, leaving Fermac exposed but still standing. Fermac asks whether Corin really needed such desperate measures to survive. The Shadow Wave is gone, but the direct Corin versus Fermac fight remains active. The Golden Mandrake becomes a costly counter rather than a permanent solution. Corin's determination carries the duel into the next Shadow Servant exchange. Fermac prepares another shadow attack after the Mandrake clears the first wave. Shadow Servant X12 restores Fermac's realm advantage against Corin. Korin answers the repeated shadow attacks with a spear technique and endurance. Whirling demonic spear keeps the shadow servants from closing cleanly. The exchange drags on as Korin relies on regeneration and pain tolerance. Rado and X jet screw combination carry the duel through another shadow attack. Furmak keeps feeding shadow attacks into the endurance contest. Furmak insists victory can never belong to Korin inside the Citadel of Shadows. Korin uses the snake's deceit while accepting the body-burning cost of the sun state. Furmak and Korin commit to a full-strength archenemy exchange. Pandemonium turns the shared warrior roots into one mutually destructive clash. The Pandemonium exchange continues through layered spear and shadow impacts. Both fighters keep committing rather than retreating from the destructive recoil. Pandemonium's self-destructive energy overwhelms the quiet duel site. The final clash continues through blood force and close-range collision. The mutually destructive exchange reaches its last visible impact phase. The fighters remain in the same final risk contest as the impact sequence resolves. The destructive clash gives way to a quiet aftermath before Korin speaks. The bloodied spear marks the duel's aftermath before Korin's victory gives way to memory. Korin remains the point of view as the fight's cost begins to surface. The quiet aftershock becomes the doorway into Korin's remembered screams. The source transitions from the duel result into the trauma attached to that victory. Korin remembers people pleading for help inside the paradise that became hell. The remembered paradise is shown as a landscape of suffering rather than salvation. Countless innocent deaths fill the memory behind Korin's duty. Korin remembers many friends lost to the hell he refuses to let return. Furmak's defeat matters because Tath's Balthazar's plan would bring that hell to the world. The memory returns to the present, where the recovered rune and treasure question remain. The Destiny Stone of Phaleus, Leah Fall, is one of 4 treasures protected by the Druids. Furmak received the treasure for retrieving a primal rune, while Corinne recovered that stolen rune. Tath's Balthazar is gathering 8 primal runes to manifest Shadow Paradise. Arisha carries the severely injured Korin away, while the cleanup continues. Students visit Korin with snacks and fruit after hearing that he is hospitalized. The supportive group overwhelms Korin until he says he is already full. Korin's recovery room is crowded with food and familiar company after the Furmak crisis. The group gathers around Korin's bed with sweets and fruit while he recovers. Friends turn the recovery visit into a shared game and treat Korin as one of them. The cheering friends celebrate Korin instead of leaving him isolated after the crisis. A knock interrupts the easy visit and turns everyone's attention to the door. A blonde visitor opens the door while the person inside asks who it is. Ariu Kassar and Professor Josephine appear together in the academy corridor as they check Korin's condition. Korin's red-eyed close-up carries the statement that Professor Furmak was a spy. Josephine stands beside Ariu while Korin points to the runes found on Furmak's body. Josephine reacts to the 80-year gap while Korin invokes the familiar spear techniques from his past. Ariu's restrained close-up accompanies the warning that the real form is not prepared to escape its nature. A layered historical image shows an earlier Vich body and the current Ariu Kassar body in succession. A rune-marked, flame-backed figure appears as the explanation turns to bodies made from runestones. A tight, unnamed close-up holds on the historical figure as the creator distinction lands. Ariu presents Marie Dunaref's promotion with the Southern Guardians League recommendation. Students in the hall react to Marie's record and the rare semi-special tier promotion. The ceremony lines up the credited students, including the visible name Arisha Aiden. Other roster labels stay unassigned. Korin smiles as the ceremony reaches his own name, and the Academy's recognition broadens. Korin's displayed 5th-tier card transitions to a 1st-tier Guardian card above his full-body portrait. A shield over a crowd of silhouettes visualizes the Guardian band Korin can organize. A classmate's summer plan is shown as Korin listens to everyone describe where they will go. Korin stands alone inside the empty family house, facing the rooms his family left behind. A friend urgently invites Korin to come along after hearing he is afraid to go home alone. Korin answers with a guarded promise to visit the East another time. The train pulls away at speed, carrying Korin toward the southern continent. Passengers are forced to raise their hands inside the car as the robbery begins. An unfamiliar bandit presence fills the aisle as the train's occupants realize the car is under threat. Korin challenges the demand to put his hands up, while a blade is held across him. Korin strikes upward into a hooded bandit, answering the robbery with force. Korin raises a fist with Marie behind him as the 1st-tier Guardian card announces the journey south. The grimoire opens on a wounded spear-bearing warrior standing against a rock. A masked, white-haired warrior appears in the book as the narrator asks whether he wants his suffering to end. The warrior is shown wounded and asking for water to quench his thirst. The legend answers with the image of water being carried to the wounded warrior. The next image shows the warrior's body restored, making endurance the book's central promise. Korin Loke closes the grimoire after comparing the brutal legend with his own determination. The southern route is introduced through its cheerful transport staff and the promise of another transfer. At the transfer point, Korin and Marie move through the crowd while the next connection comes into view. The faster southern option opens into a Wyvern Rider field, making the scale of the route impossible to miss. The Wyvern Rider's sign confirms that speed comes with a price at the southern transfer. A landing tower encircling wyverns mark the approach to the southern plains and its major cities. A passenger wyvern drops toward the ornate Dunaref estate, carrying the southbound trip into its family sphere. Korin Loke stares as Marie explains that her family's south holdings are tied to agriculture. Marie Dunaref laughs as the true figure is corrected from 2 million square feet to 2 million hectares. Korin peers through the carriage window and admits that the Dunaref estate is seriously impressive. The ornate carriage rolls toward the Dunaref household while Korin processes how much wealth surrounds Marie. Paul, the Dunaref butler, appears as the household's formal point of contact. Marie leads Korin through the shopping district while he tries to keep up with her spending. Marie brings Korin to the smith storefront where the mineral gift is waiting. Marie places the wrapped mineral in Korin's hands and ties it to Arisha Aiden's Demon Slayer blade. The material is named adamantine as the faceted stone catches the light in Korin's hand. Korin Loke lifts the stone himself, astonished that a material this valuable is being given to him. Marie blushes while explaining that adamantine should let Korin's spear function within a domain. Marie calls the adamantine her last present and beams when Korin likes it. Korin answers with sincere thanks, understanding that the gift could change his next fight. At dinner, Korin approaches a table prepared for the Dunaref family and its guest. Marie's mother welcomes Korin as a handsome young man while the family gathers around the meal. Mard Dunaref turns the dinner toward a question about Korin and Marie's relationship and purity. Marie's mother slaps Mard for pushing the question, and the dinner erupts into family embarrassment. The family dinner dispute escalates into a visible slap as the son-in-law misunderstanding carries forward. Mard Dunaref rejects the idea of Marie marrying Korin with theatrical certainty. Marie pushes back against her father's argument, and the dinner's polite surface breaks into comic physical chaos. The whole table witnesses the Dunaref household turning Korin's visit into a question of family approval. Marie's mother thanks Korin and says that her daughter deserves a happier ending. Korin Loke is left scrambling for words as the family treats him like a future son-in-law. At the Castle Duke's party, the South's noble world opens behind an imposing white castle. Count Cassius welcomes the visitors with the confidence of a noble house receiving a valuable connection. Korin recognizes the man who once barred his way until a sea serpent was defeated. Marie's presence draws the room's attention before the first dance has even begun. An unnamed suitor kneels and asks Marie for the honor of her first dance. The ballroom closes around Marie as several guests reach for her attention at once. Marie blushes when Korin steps into the attention surrounding her. Korin takes Marie onto the floor and begins the dance he says will repay his debt to her. Korin Loke stays focused on leading Marie, even as the ballroom makes the moment feel more intimate than he intended. Korin admits he is not a natural dancer, but Marie follows him while he keeps trying to lead. With the steps settled, Korin and Marie share a dreamlike dance in front of the watching room. Korin escorts Marie away from the floor, as the other suitors complain that he has taken the opportunity from them. In the hidden library, Korin pulls an unexpected book from the shelf and starts asking what it contains. The recovered volume is a substantial grimoire, not an ordinary book from the office shelves. Korin studies the volumes and realizes the book is tied to Sabancia Duke rather than to a routine side quest. Marie searches with Korin while the hidden room suggests that the two volumes are part of a larger mechanism. Marie recognizes the next step and prepares to summon Dioku for the book plan. Dioku appears as a large red canine form while Marie calls him out and Korin watches from beside her. Dioku whines and resists the plan instead of accepting the book's intended use. The red form begins to disappear, leaving Korin and Marie to interpret what the reaction means. Inside the red-black space, an unseen presence fixes Korin with a red-eyed stare. An unknown red-black visitor advances through the space with a long weapon and a hostile presence. Korin asks whether the visitor is Sabancia Duke, and the figure accepts the name while asking who Korin is. Korin introduces himself as a distant junior and asks how Sabancia separated body and soul. Sabancia cuts Korin off, and Korin braces for the confrontation as the red space surges around them. The encounter resumes with Sabancia's red-black presence, overwhelming the red space, while Korin meets the attack. Sabancia describes 8 centuries of his soul and senses eroding until blood desire became a master. His glowing eyes and stitched visage make the vampire's lost control tangible, without reducing him to a simple villain. The narration connects that loss of control to a beast-like form, without turning the image into a final species or body claim. Sabanzia's wrath surges back into the fight as the explanation gives way to force. Korin catches a weapon or arm in a binding grip, trying to hold the immortal's momentum in place. Korin Loke, still the dark-haired red-eyed fighter in the brown vest, raises the source-labeled sixth technique, Pandemonium. A purple serpentine force sweeps across the combat space and throws Korin through the frame. Sabansia answers with a towering purple attack, sword raised inside the vertical energy. The vampire closes on Korin at point-blank range, showing how little room the binding leaves. A red-coated attacker cuts down through the frame, while Marie is caught in the lower line of action. Golden chains wrap the red figure and force the confrontation into a temporary bind. The source-rendered binding sword of Romania appears as the anti-immortal seal layered over the chain restraint. When the violence drops away, Korin lies bloodied and unresponsive while Marie reaches for him. The red space weapon remains between the camera and the long-haired opponent, as the last danger hangs over Korin. Marie leans close to Korin, but the visual contact is not narrated as her feeding on him. Marie controls the moment long enough to give her own blood as the source's elixir rather than take Korin's. Marie remains beside the injured Korin, asking him to open his eyes after the healing effort. Korin answers Marie's fear with a calm hand on her shoulder and the reassurance that he is still there. Sabanzia names Korin Loke and recognizes the potential for a true hero. The request becomes concrete: change what Sabanzia could not protect without claiming Korin has completed it. The red presence withdraws, leaving the injured pair in the quiet room. The reward condenses as a luminous core at Korin's chest after Sabanzia's aura core is awarded. Even after the reward, Korin is not fully recovered. Marie steadies him, and he protests that he is still hurt. Marie admits she was afraid Korin would leave her behind, a reaction that deepens the aftermath without resolving romance. Korin's small, tired smile shows relief, not a claim that the new core's abilities are understood. The pair settle together as the immediate crisis ends. The reward is emotionally worth the cost while Korin's obligations remain. The room falls quiet and the door stands open after Sabanzia's departure. Sabanzia's memory shows the family he could not protect, treated as a memory rather than proof of a restored body. Sabanzia finally finds peace after 8 centuries. Korin carries the aura core, dual core state, and the request forward. Korin examines the aftermath of the new aura core, while Marie remains beside him. The newly acquired power is still tied to Sabanzia Duke's unresolved legacy. Korin is still trying to make sense of the change, while the resident's aftermath becomes awkward. A maid arrives at exactly the wrong moment and reads the room in the most embarrassing way. The cramped scene looks worse than it is, and Korin's shock makes the misunderstanding explicit. The awkward aftermath follows Korin into the next exchange before the letter sends the group onward. Korin returns to spear training as the next semester and the road ahead come into view. The group travels back toward school and the festival season by carriage. Southern city traffic turns the coming festival into a possible business opportunity. Korin imagines the festival turning the inn investment into a mountain of gold. His confidence keeps climbing before the financial risk catches up with him. The enormous hurricane arrives before the festival plan can safely begin. The crisis reaches the people who will have to decide whether the academy can wait. Lightning tears through the rain over the southern route. The sea route is not merely wet, it is being torn apart by force moving through the water. A sea serpent cuts through the storm-torn route, part of the ecological chain the narration is still reconstructing. The disturbance gathers multiple moving figures and a winged silhouette into one violent storm image. The serpent's passage leaves the route in turmoil, and the storm's wider cause remains open. A few days later, Merkava Academy gathers its available professors and students around one table. Director Ariu Kassar opens the emergency discussion. The table divides between waiting for the hurricane to cease and going after the creature. The discussion weighs the hurricane's breeding season and the length of the danger against the cost of inaction. The room murmurs as the professors compare academy duties, students, and the exposed city. Korin answers the debate by invoking the Guardian Creed and the duty to protect the weak. Korin refuses to treat homeless victims as an acceptable cost of waiting. The room recognizes the force of Korin's argument. An inn is full of people, and people are precious lives. The professors stop debating and organize an attack team under the Guardian's oath. The newly formed squad reaches the hurricane with its support plan still being coordinated. Korin stands among the people who have chosen to go with him. Korin thinks that he will be able to protect everyone, but the hurricane has not been defeated. The support team tears open a route through the hurricane. The opening is violent, with debris and broken air around the figures. The attack team moves through the opening before the hurricane closes again. The route is temporary, so every guardian advances under pressure. Inside the hurricane, a starving horde of demonic beasts is trapped in the same disaster. Their starvation widens the mission. Korin Loke sees how many lives and creatures the storm has caught. The scale of the trapped disaster becomes personal. A pale-haired armored combatant drives another strike through the storm. The attack remains part of the mixed support formation. The formation cuts deeper into the storm toward the bat-shaped threat. The advancing Guardians still lack a stable path. Corrin reaches a demonic beast as the team fights through the hurricane's pressure. No creature is called an ally by appearance alone. A smaller hurricane coils inside the larger one, keeping the team from a direct approach. Named Guardians hold their positions while the hurricane tears past them. The Guardians gather behind a red-lit defensive formation as the storm intensifies. The storm-forming creature rises above the Guardians as the power gap becomes visible. Alvan's eye fixes the team in the storm, now charged with a more dangerous force. Corrin calls for Vazikr, while both fighters are being thrown through the hurricane. The surrounding Guardians become temporary footholds, not a new team roster. A teammate becomes the next unstable foothold as the wind throws the formation apart. Corrin borrows a teammate's head for one more step toward Alvan. Another Guardian is pulled into Corrin's improvised path through the wind. Corrin finally finds a line through the storm and commits to the attack. Mountain Destroyer Ultimate Technique, Infallible Single Attack, and Massive Strike drive into Alvan. The impact leaves Corrin exposed inside the storm center. Even in the aftermath, Corrin's thoughts break toward the food he could have bought with the debt money. Red force tears through the storm around the combatants. A dark, unreadable presence crosses the red aftermath as visibility breaks apart. Corrin is still conscious in the violent transition, but the storm's cause remains outside his view. The storm has stopped, and a Guardian looks back in shock at the unexplained silence. The change identifies the result, not the cause. In the quiet after the storm, shadowed figures approach the vulnerable scene. A light-haired figure steps into the warm clearing, while the foreground watcher reacts. Corrin lies exposed beneath the quiet light as a prayer-like voice begins. The prayer continues through a close, frightened-looking eye. A large golden-brown shape lies beneath Corrin, but its nature is still unknown. Two church-like women and a red-orange horned figure stand over Corrin as the prayer reaches Amen and a new declaration begins. Merkava City is still standing after the hurricane, with only minor damage visible as the emergency gives way to recovery. People return to meals and volunteer work almost as quickly as the city returns to its streets. The cafeteria has resumed its small routines, even while stranger consequences of the storm remain nearby. Corrin Loke notices a dark-haired, red-eyed demonic human in the middle of the Academy's ordinary meal service. The figure identifies themselves as a living Jiangshi and as a demonic beast made from a living human being. The conversation frames helping the weak as the beginning of civilization, but the figure's chains show how far that principle is from being secure. Corrin listens as the conversation shifts from what the Jiangshi is to who is allowed to speak through it. The body and voice dispute unfolds in full view of the cafeteria, not in an abstract vision detached from the people around it. One voice claims the living Jiangshi identity while another voice answers with the accusation that Hua is a monster. Corrin can hear the dispute, but hearing it does not tell him which voice owns the history of the body. The second voice demands its body back, while the other voice answers that the body belongs to it. The refusal hardens. The voice in control says it will never give the body back. In a Merkava City back alley, the Black Stars control a tavern built on fear and hidden trade. The gang waters down liquor, charges for protection, and turns vulnerable demonic humans into inventory. Corrin enters the tavern looking like an easy target, but the unsteady posture is part of the trap. The performance continues as Corrin turns toward the men who have taken the bait. Corrin pours a drink over one of the men and calls himself a dog catcher who specializes in rabid dogs. The taunt becomes a close-quarters fight, and the local Black Stars operation is broken before the rescue route opens. Behind the tavern, Corrin reaches the holding site and opens a door into the cages. A lock gives way, turning the rescue from an offer into a real exit. Among the captives are two young white-haired werbeast-like siblings, still children rather than the adults Corrin remembers. Corrin explains that werbeasts can grow up in an instant, linking the frightened children to the adults he once knew. In Corrin's remembered future, Ren and Ron were adults who served the old order and became villains. Corrin chooses the children in front of him and promises that no one will hurt them anymore. They are safe now. Corrin carries the rescue forward, but the choice has already forced him to abandon the convenient plan he came in with. At the inn, Corrin explains to barmaid Lenya that his middle boss plan targeted the older Ren and Ron he remembered. These are still children. A large flight beast lands at the academy, bringing a delegation from Borame and a new political pressure into the story. Senior Professor Ryun Kang introduces himself and his two students, Jin Hyuk-sa and Yua Kang, the student president of Borame Academy. The welcome turns hostile when Jin Hyuk rejects the suggestion to forget the past. A dark-haired, red-eyed figure appears amid flames as the delegation's old grievance points toward an unnamed, despicable creature. 1 month after Hurricane Bat, Merkava Academy is dressing itself for the festival. The festival will divide the Guardians into individual, doubles, and group contests. Korin Loke watches the preparations as a dark-haired, red-eyed first-tier Guardian in his white shirt and brown vest. The arrival of the Eastern delegation pulls Korin into a meeting that is more urgent than the festival decorations suggest. Korin looks toward the visitors, aware that the Eastern delegation has brought an old grievance with it. Boramei's delegation stands together, the enlightened Ryun Kang, vicious kicking hound Jin Hyuk Sa, and Lady of the Sword Yuhua Kang. The delegation invokes a calamity that reduced an entire castle to rubble. Bishop Junyan Louis of the Old Order treats the custody dispute as a matter of faith, danger, and proof. The dispute names Yu Kang as Hwaran's father and as Eryu's old friend. The accusation hardens into a demand that the demonic presence be removed from the child. Josephine recognizes that a pious believer like Bishop Louis may also see a witch as an evil to burn. Eryu's proposal leaves Hwaran with the decisive choice, leave or stay, by her own will. The meeting settles into logistics. The political dispute remains open, but the festival still has to function. Josephine accepts that she must watch the Old Order while the visitors remain inside Merkava's festival plans. The room's controlled negotiation briefly breaks into open protest. Korin Loke returns to the practical plan, watch the Old Order, and house the visiting students. Outside the meeting room, the festival spreads across the city as a public event. Korin's inns become part of the arrangement. Boramei's students can be housed there while Josephine keeps watch. The preliminaries move from political preparation to the Academy's formal competition grounds. Ryun Kang opens the festival group matches, preliminaries before a crowd of students and citizens. Korin stands among the contestants, still a participant in a test that measures protection as much as combat. The enlightened Ryun Kang takes the judge's position and announces that 16 Guardians will be selected for the group matches. The contestants are sent into the Stone Sentinel maze, where citizens must be treated as people to save. With the judge's command, the Stone Sentinel maze begins. A long hound lunges through the maze, turning the citizen rescue test into an immediate fight. Arisha Aiden answers in an instant, cutting the long hound down with a blue sword strike. After the attack, Arisha's group gathers the stone citizens and searches for a safe area. Before the rescue route can settle, a red silhouette bandit force enters the maze. The Mandrake bandits assemble the stone mannequins into a tank, while Jaeger plays a harp-like instrument above it. The chapter closes on an altered voice declaring, "For I am the almighty Immortan Loke." Alright everyone, that's it for today. See you next time.